So Dallas, the alumni Zoom thing is a great idea for tomorrow night. Tell Sherry the alumni Zoom thing is a great idea for tomorrow night.
I'll do so.
I may even get Ballard to come in, and it'll be the first time that Webb, Clark, Ballard, and I were together in 30 years.
Yeah, it's easier virtually than it is in person.
That's so true. So true.
Are we about ready to rock and roll here?
Yep, I'm sending the 1AC right now. Just double check, make sure I have everybody on the chain. Yeah. Yeah, I got it. All right, the 1AC is sent. If I could have either a thumbs up or preferably verbal confirmation from everyone once they have it.
You responded to the chain. There we go.
David, I got it.
All right.
That's good. Wait. Give me 1 sec.
Of course.
I have it.
I'm muting and I'm ready to rock.
Okay. And everybody just stop me if you're not ready. Yep. Contention 1 is Georgia. Black Sea conflict is imminent. Georgia shorting. Black status is a crossroads. The great source of the region with high sensitive conflict. Civil wars are causing migration to occur. Disruptive challenge dribble immediately. Europe, Russia, Caucasus, the Mideast region. Face wider conflicts. Separate moon, Odessa, Spark, Romania, exploit resources in Syria, increase crisis, international and offshore. Intermediate conflict stories, visible development. And development of Russian capability, add fuel increasability will be essential for conflict. America support Georgia Western path. Merging Caucasus military units and conventional upgrades guarantee invasion unless Georgia is integrated. Numbers feeling 18 most important event during was merging fall units under Russian involving Caucasus and study troops upgraded higher weapons over police. In case NATO increase only use Georgia attack immediately since Ukraine Russia established vision for large combat tactics. Russia free to expand that NATO presence. Russia free will be very high. There's no black architecture hard powers. That means your position that NATO whole Caucasus falls to Georgia. We give it Russia starting curse. No, it's not convinced. Attack your structure based on presence. That is unwilling to center wider competition inside the Caucasus defending. The hub Russia began to power project further triangle of Crimea, Armenia, and Russia creating corridor to Europe, creating the southern flank. Russia against buffer control routes. That's respond to sanctions wars. On a readjusted status quo defending the show, bringing stability. The entire architecture goes global and nuclear. Kumova 18 Black Sea experiencing a changing balance states intensifying military potential environment is rapidly changing. By making retracted conflicts with secret build transactional sanctions, dimensions, learning conditions, and critical high risk environment, which forces with advanced weapons including nuclear systems are in close proximity. Adding Georgia to NATO solves CO-19 allows along Black Sea of confidence in America. We can after from Kilo F with rough Afghanistan here, leaving us facing a short positions to keep Russia under check. NATO needs more free presence. Currently, Georgia play major roles in probably shouting gateway. Controlling access small countries played out strong global security. Black Sea and strong market ability of causing the city camps. Determined camps with threatening active aggression. NATO presence. The Black Sea with security center strong Chile use of state protecting flanks and partners. Georgia's on track for a session, but blocked by NATO's fear of applying Article 5 to Russian-occupied regions. Gallery 19 Stoltenberg promised Georgia have those memberships in the Carson way of years for construction maintain conditions on houses. And study Georgia's second limit consider Article 5 membership. For NATO confirm Putin's aggression launcher. Alliance would agree guarantee extend only to parts under Georgia control. I would agree from flexibility, willingness to counter provocation features now since Crimea and Ukraine. Modifying the scope of Article 5 ensures quick accession. Every other requirement in line. Bill 18 Wise. NATO accepts Georgia's fight. Answers by continued efforts to include progress. NATO much likely to avoid confrontation. Georgia's all the solutions by progress. Yes, GMAP Russia effectively vetoed accession. Occupation gives leverage to bar Georgia. Accession may immediately occupation revoke Article 5 starting war. Russia play the card and it's waiting NATO for action to ensure accession relations merit delicate proximity. I would escalate NATO under should amend rules when after Article 6 to save Caucasus no from guarantees in the past Mohammed Algeria partial accession would accept Georgia without challenging Russia enabling Georgia to restore sovereignty through diplomatic means. Washington's primary benefactor of the initiative convince Europe enabling a tangible path to accession from Georgia from drifting toward Russia and as C16 Georgia Georgia back into the orbit of Russia. Tangible sense of invited to NATO seek assurances alliance. Omega other promise alliance hesitate leaving Georgia. Georgia's frustration builds more for state Georgia should cut losses and approach Moscow. That closes U.S. supply routes to Afghanistan. Castor 18 devices transfers played an important role in advancing Afghanistan. You still has Pakistan 90 and North is an immediate interest to value reasons sides of Russia as Georgia strengthening passing opportunities for using command research less than on every source. Nuclear war fell with around 20 years to dominate Afghanistan. Use government it's not hostile prosecuting interest under British presence for power not right now not prevent U.S. from operating interests or preventing nuclear war and terrorist Pakistan nukes development exacerbate instability, safe intensification of proxy and broader escalation between new powers. Consequences be catastrophic. It ripples globally, causing great power war. Carfano, 10 Afghanistan. Look like Vietnam, AQB back. Trigger nuclear running creation programs and overdrive arms just be dangerous. Multiple power sign the war precarious alliances. So a lot of very war. Russia trying to invent and produce challenges data by fall apart. Creating a pathway for Georgia's session unlocks diverse energy access throughout the Caspian. Caesar 13 feet of Georgia's middle of affecting neighbors the Caucasus and Caspian. If Georgia's first not distance to future economic home, major bloody Europe, Caucasus home. To the energy control by Moscow, Russia monopolized energy efforts into proud to leverage Caucasus corridors. Right, that badly needed breathing room to explore electrical place data. Obligation right calculated pathway, and that stops Russian gas flaring. Gray 18 Russia flare 50 million cubic meters. This is climate force. These digital Caspian resources in a related one. Recent Moscow County Caspian is back up gas problems. Monopoly keep raising gas flares. Operations not get in. If we're forced to open problems to disappear gas wouldn't be flared apply competition results. It's all problems for Russian gas problem to open, which is the flip side of the climate. Extinction, Licky 16 flaring has severe impact efforts around the world against where the rose gas kill crops and poison air placing everyone at risk. Gas to release toxic substances, black carbon, relative the earth, wealth resources to harm health fixtures, make their way in the water, soil, making air not Russia, the nation's top flaring nation in the world. Practice structural life on earth. The southern gas corridors on the cusp and critical to Turkish and Greek energy supply. Had to 20 less than has been nearly complete infrastructure need to be supported. Azerbaijani gas is crucial to the shortest most direct way from Caspian to Europe. Huge distributed energy security key and diversification. Turkey here's benefit much of energy sources. Mediterranean energy disputes escalate. Extinction Denver 20 degrees in Turkey. Sort of about oil and gas energy risks to powers in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. You're trying to diversify some configuration of the Mediterranean fully by accident either. So Satan back now. This was playing with fire there. Every little spark can lead to catastrophe. Contention 2 is frozen conflicts. Current restrictions on accession for states with live territorial disputes incentivize Russia to provoke secessionism to short circuit closer ties with Europe. Coffee and will say team without enlargement out of an environment that you need to resolve border disputes. Flash forward tensions away from Russia's policy that won't take disputes. Tells Moscow to have territory disputes. Current insurance NATO will come. You see the league acceptable reevaluation side on fire guaranteed occupied territories. Otherwise, Russia thinks all they have to do is watch running Europe is invaded partially occupied. Georgia Russia's template for preventing states and its near abroad from pivoting west. Failure in this case encourages Putin to repeat the tactic. Cohen and Hamilton 11 war against short term and weakness in NATO and security. Find responsible for changing borders. Demonstrate fissures between the west and east versus going to determining sovereignty. South and South joining NATO stronger to other post-Soviet states. This will create protected population so that may reach our former Soviet boundaries. Specifically, a lack of flexibility determines Russian leverage and incentive for interventions in Nagorno-Karabakh. Monospazi 21 resolve Nagorno-Karabakh is geopolitical interest to conflict to bring the Russian Caucasus borders energy risk east. Caspian Central Asia removed for Europe to Asia. Russia's forcing conflicts is heading for integration in the Euro-Atlantic structures. Main objective is in Russia's interest to maintain stability. Deals benefit Russia's strengthening presence to deploy permanent presence to control Latin Armenia and Azerbaijan become satellites for war in the future. Both is with Russia. Russia will try to detail to separatist forces to prolong conflict. Russian influence is zero sum with Turkey. Bakrumar 21. Not smooth. Turkey's centrality defined as limited in Moscow. Dialogue here will play in this settlement play in Moscow. Turkey out while Moscow assembles peace. Turkey is not liking it. Being pragmatic, Ankara established relations, calculus changes overnight. Successful Turkish coordination reopens the Turco-Armenian border, boosts Armenian growth, Kyrgyz and Oxan 20 stability from settlement. Both Turkey kill relations. Rupture of borders closed by deal by Russia. Has been set a more promising future. Need Turkey to revive accords with Armenia with regard to opening the border of major impediments. Room studies show impact the economic situation and access to the external water. So oversaw the O9 protocols. Fundamental changes has a pragmatic streak. Recognize the need to address economic isolation, single improve relations with recognize prestige, opening borders, bringing internationally support. You have to overcome domestic resistance challenges. Such an initiative would be Russia with Putin-led reconciliation service in Armenia that removes Iranian influence. Valley Hagazba at all 13 Armenia in need of Iran to establish contact power. Feels insecure problem with Turkey. Iran Armenia influenced by Iran Ankara transition limiting Iranian presence. Normalization has become an extra. Iran and Turkey sending competition. Armenia Turkey for transition relations break the system. Changes the equation, shortening space for Iran and energy to bring the country west. Middle Eastern instability escalates. Global war. Claire 18. A third go forward distinguished by geographic span of fighting in the major actors involved in the Mediterranean to Hormuz participation. Participants include Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, Shia militias in Iraq and Yemen, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the US, UAE, Russian forces equipping themselves with massive modern weaponry, ensuring fight will be horrifically destructive, quickly escalate when fall careful plans, clash between Israeli and Iranian military conditions in Syria, rapid escalation for little warning. Pay attention to the world. The words of Netanyahu will ideology and religion play a part underlying his geopolitical struggle for control war. It will prove to be the road on hell and humanity's rise. Renewed ties, reverse dangerous trends. Kind of 9. Open border create opportunities for initiatives combating crime and trafficking, given Armenia remains an important source and routes to Mideast and elsewhere. Resources and environment are obvious for priority in the region. Early need organized crime cause extinction. Mikovic 13 illegal economy puts an actions with our markets to capture states on downwards toward insecurity and instability. Corrupt development or stifle criminal networks, deteriorate social conditions and feeling conflicts. Russian repetition of the Georgia tactic makes conflict inevitable. Lost 20 lessons. One of the Kremlin from causes south of the city unfold. Nagorno-Karabakh enters the Russian peacekeepers or one peace. Not guaranteed deals been vague around refugees here for sure. Also, Russia's right to veto, running leverage, like kindling no settlement over status that will perpetuate tensions. Nagorno-Karabakh goes nuclear. Zealand and Fallon Howard 20 AK. Propaganda no large Russian Turkish clash drawing into NATO. When Russia protect Armenia fight through Georgia. Russia result nuke use to Dr. Moscow. Launch a missile war involved NATO. Instantly a nuke war in a short time. The plan solves results in resolution of territorial disputes in Georgia's favor. Feeling 19 Article 5 only covered non-occupied Georgia. NATO will not have the obligation to install occupied facility, return to occupied territories, make Georgia develop Russian Russian occupation right. NATO Georgia will become will turn this scheme by 180. Georgia will become Russia's weakest Abkhazia single of the South Caucasus Russian supported with Russia not guaranteed population small. I think Russians vanishing will become a headache for Russia. Nothing other. That's a nexus for post-Soviet territorial conflict resolution. Creates a positive model. Grovels 15. Georgia peace process comes to state of development and if war intimately frozen conflicts, right, instability and uncertainty is not only to Georgia but also to neighbors. Here to be important national policy, political access to global importance for security vacuum conversion. Strong office will grow into continental war. Obviously, on Georgia's territory have to be valued in global theaters. And if the Cold War is going to find an era of new conflicts, which at their core interstate territory seeks like infrastructure deal with these as well as uncertainty surrounding the will of Europe powers to respond to fire fears for destabilization. Georgia functions point of departure for a number of conflicts. These point at legacy development in Georgia demonstrate fragile Western ideas where American support was a model and a symbol of success. Georgia undermined assumptions that no border should be moved as a result of conquest as long as these remain Georgia indefinitely linked with global reach to echo unrest around other theaters. Independently, that model mitigates global territorial conflicts. Each escalates. Step number 19, territoriality like the hard global politics, institutional American conflicts in North America, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Territory use aliens has risen to private leisure because often places publicly become likely none of these local tensions reverberate through the world. China, hormones, up and the Golden Heights, has rebuttal, high tensions and fallout between nuclear powers, modern tech and tensions and grievances, global hospitals, prisoners against cascading events they can no longer stop. Thus, the plan, the United States government should restrict its activation of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty and Russian-controlled territories in the North Atlantic area. Contention 3 is solvency. The plan revamps Article 5 to apply outside of Russian-controlled territory. That defeats their denial by disruption strategy and spurs peaceful accession. NATO says yes, but U.S. leads key coffee and tea contested membership not be offered to countries where their territories need to lead the reevaluation of large state where willing to members if they have disputes with the caveat went on to apply guaranteed occupied territories. This is New President 55 in West Germany, Algeria, Congo, Morocco. This is radical. We take Georgia, we want to apply occupied territories. Only happen if the U.S. wishes leads the line through, but helps support NATO. Let's go to the usual leadership, but should only region on the Russian occupation. Get Article 5. That unique mechanism and signal are vital. Schultz and all 21. Because NATO is scared of my progress of the refillable war. NATO is going to shift their Chinese leadership of the proposal. We can build a coalition pressure France Germany. Whole idea is controversial. Russia uses for disinfo. Only temporary measure when conflict ends all of territory that will fall on Article 5 will mean concession. When it changes that score, rest of Georgia gets NATO's Article 5. Huge benefit for Georgia officials is the only way in the alliance can concerned about public caution misinformation from Russia with Biden time Georgia. It will be amenable to Russia's veto. Your Moldova, Georgia. Your Atlantic integration is top beat on the veto. Have a new dynamic when it comes to integration and clear and consistent signal from the whole of government is vital. Wilson 18. Create a carve out for territories use Russia as well as their hyper Russians need if there's a sense of use in bill small nations depend on sense of veto. That's where we push back this we can voice out of Congress in support of Georgia's support single allies. We need to take a step further. How will allies imagine how we can actually from the province will start because everybody assume Russian occupation we can't advance. We have to change the paradigm of our city. We'll have Russia play games recipe for conflict. Go back to the Georgia advantage. A clear signal membership dissuades Georgian fears such about folly 3-2 Russian members and effective Georgia's aspiration widely grid among political players that ingrained in Georgia continuation to prevent membership. Georgia's not kinetic schools this time not on Georgia's size population expects danger results when it comes to NATO membership. That card is marked at NATO membership. Jordan will send that card in the plain text. Yeah, when it comes to NATO membership. And I'm ready for cross-X whenever you get that. The card in the plain text are sent.
Okay, let me just put the plan into the 1AC doc real quick. Okay. You're good?
Yep.
Okay. If we regain, or if Russia loses control of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, would they become part of Article 5 guarantees again?
Yeah.
Yes. So their plan leaves the possibility of reverting back the guarantee.
It wouldn't be a reversion. The plan permanently and unequivocally prevents Article 5 from applying to all Russian-occupied territories. Obviously,
right,
if they
but
no
if Russia doesn't
occupied, they're covered. But if there are other Russian-occupied territories somewhere else in the world, those also would not be covered under Article 5.
To be clear, I think I know what you're trying to get at. It is not a condition. It's not a fiat mandate of the F. We think that NATO would definitely add them.
Okay, what are other territories the plan could exclude?
There aren't territories that our evidence speaks to outside of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Those are the two most certain territories. But in the event that Russia occupies other territories within the North Atlantic area, all of those territories that are potentially Russian occupied would be excluded.
Okay,
nearly all of them. We don't have to be every single one, and we won't. The only ones relevant to the
I want to ask about your Black Sea scenario. Romania, Hungary, and Turkey all cover the Black Sea. Why is adding Georgia necessary for deterrence?
Because all of those countries, although they are near the Black Sea, Georgia borders the Black Sea.
What do you mean near the Black Sea?
They have the most direct access to Russia.
Dude,
Romania does not border Russia. Like Romania does not
bordering Russia. What evidence do you think that says bordering Russia is necessary to?
We've read like 3 cards that all indicate that.
Yeah, I get you read 3 cards.
Yeah.
I'm asking for the warrant.
I'm going to answer this question. Yeah. So I think the 2 cards that you should look at that are the best ones for this are the Demirashvili card and the Cohen card. The warrant that the Demirashvili card gets at is that the passway that connects the Black Sea to Georgia is the most likely and necessary place that Russia would need to control and dominate in order for them to gain dominance in the region. The Cohen card then says that,
you're just using big buzzwords like dominance here. I'm asking you, what is Russia going to do that they could not do?
I'm pulling warrants from the Demirashvili card that indicates that Georgia is the critical access point because of the territory that they occupy. That is a strategic location in the Black Sea.
I want to ask now why is Georgia necessary for us to supply Afghanistan?
Because Georgia exists between Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, and the rest of Western Europe. So what
is the U.S.? Okay, then I guess what is the U.S. doing in the status quo that is insufficient to be able to supply Afghanistan?
It's not supplying Afghanistan. It's rather having access to Afghanistan.
Yeah,
so it's not like we are giving energy, but it's like the United States is currently using Pakistan and the Indian North Pipeline, which are both either dependent on an unstable country or Russia, which makes it likely that they will be cut off, and we need to diversify transit routes in order to prevent that.
That's fine. Advantage 2, I want to ask, what is the internal link to solving, I guess, all the like Middle Eastern influence type stuff here?
The Middle Eastern influence is predicated off of, if I'm not mistaken, Russian influence in Armenia and opening the Turco-Armenian border, removing Iranian influence as a consequence of opening that border.
Okay.
Because Iranian influence and Turkish influence in Armenia are zero-sum with one another.
Okay.
And Iranian influence is what causes instability.
Wait, the order is 5, then the first advantage, and then the second advantage. Okay. Can I just get a thumbs up from everyone when they're ready to go? Awesome. First off is the expansion DA, adding Georgia signals democratic expansion that causes authoritarian counterbalancing that destabilizes the Middle East mob. If forces society secure term out before the outbreak of the coronavirus will experience a reintegration of surge part of the Middle East pressure. Commit offense to the fourth Lebanon. Approaches during the Iraq recent covers devastating proportion. This region can experience uprising similar to the Arab Spring. The external power Iraq forcefully and Russia's Russian leadership made too. Any intervention in Libya condemning mission creep Putin presumed as in the role of counter-revolutionary cause reacting explosion in the Black Sea neighborhood. The Saddam could be very definite counter-revolutionary move, but against Syria, Georgia presents an easier target. In Bako's nuclear attacks are on the table. In Syria, Wilson in 17 Trump refused to back down and continue to fly. Sorties in Syria reference to fighters to fly force strike aircraft out of Syrian airspace under the no-fly zone. You have no shooting war with Russian military doctrine calls for use of tactical weapons and real nuclear options on the table. Gravity bombs are filled with dial to yield nuclear warhead. These are weapons that are terribly used in that battlefield all right next door in the 1914 Europe through under the battlefield strategies and miscalculation in Syria could have far greater consequences and independently expansion triggers Russian preemptive strikes. Those go nuclear. Arbitravidal in 17 Russian experts are engaged in effort to fight in war and make sure organized actions by the U.S. power should be countered with organized Russian forces. The Russian needs to counterattack system with anti-missile radio electro warfare calls being made to translate into a policy new obligation in Yugoslavia and Iraq. Writing new challenges gave the power the opportunity to impress leadership with writing thought justifying after Cuban Russian leaders experience scenarios of conflict one through non-nuclear means conflict in reality quickly escalate into nuclear exchange. The authors of strategy imagine the West would wage a Korean campaign and arrow destruction Western we basic premise use campaign led to Iraq may be implemented against Russia to the most author represented defense industry. The exposed Russian strategies globally active with the possibility of airspace by the NATO because of the limitation of Russian ability to defend the U.S. Russia may resort to limited weapons to the U.S. to backing down the widely accepted fact that major wars seen contemporary Russian thinking prolonged the different evolving and integrated nuclear non-nuclear operations creates a breeding ground for rapid escalation global nuclear war. Next off is the advantage counterplan. The United States federal government should designate Georgia an ally, a U.S. ally, and substantially increase its financial and technical cooperation with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization member states on renewable energy, electricity, transmission, and storage, and advanced nuclear technologies. The counterplan makes Georgia a bilateral NATO ally. At DCMA in 18, the current U.S.-Georgia relationship is based on a strategic partnership. More options can be explored bilaterally. Granting Georgia an ally status would further incentivize Georgia's dependability for the United States and medium and long-term interest in the Black Sea and South Caucasus and Central Asia. And bilateral alliance commitments with Georgia create Goldilocks U.S.-Taiwan-style commitments that balance flexible response with deterrence. Kyrgyzstan and 20 bilateral military strategic response to the U.S. and most of our opposition power security region might be the ideal example. Can be also pushes more for Georgia reliable outputs in strategically important region. Georgia needs to receive a very strong united message from the U.S. regarding the Euro-Atlantic integration as well as a clear integration on how to deal with expectation management at home. And bilateral expansion best bypasses every reason why NATO is key. Policy 111 cresting expanding costs that have been successfully voted with the 27 years of a breakup since the Soviet Union. Washington to respond by sending military forces and air presence in Georgia to ensure Russian aggression, pride of family, a nearby location, pride strategic death and operation capability in times of limited war and peace. The vast military base integration Georgia into new overseas architecture, ideal location for the U.S. to store supplies and keep forces that can respond to the decisively state adversaries and terrorist threats. Like the problem with U.S. native flexibility to deter Russia, and that solves European energy diversification. Morningstar in 20, the Baltic states are diverse and great supplies efforts driven by LNG imports when it will generate massive energy in the European markets. To turn potential when coupled with blackout generations, batteries, a viable intermittency decrease the farms of distribution. parts are agrees and benefit from improved terms and there are opportunities to transfer like partnerships for best practices. There's opportunity for U.S. collaboration after one in terms of social infrastructure, nuclear powers, uncertain government. Let's support the lack of support for nuclear energy will have in place for the nuclear place for one energy security. The U.S. and EU should continue cooperation on advancing the nuclear missiles and SMR. Next off, topicality, reduce. A point is reduce means unconditional and permanent. Reynolds in 59 reduce does not mean say temporary suspending the plan destruction meaning of the word so just finish lower to grade reduce the scene a permanency. B point violation. First, the plan preserves the possibility of reverting to the baseline number of circumstances in which the United States would come to an ally's aid. Second, not all limitations are reduction spheres. And if the claim to use the word limit to not reduce the claim means the two words on that same limit means boundary or restriction reduce means to bring down the size number will reduce not be subject to limit. 3 by at least implies that the plan must implement a limitation that reduces not all limitations a priori qualify as reductions. Hansen and 2 there are arguments that know the invalid priority that involves at least one. The argument is question dog black dog black. We know the argument is invalid but not is a priority the court touched by at least one of both. Consider any classic case such as X sentence X that allows for the sentence of this class could never happen with both. The class K consists of true sentences X is false. C point is standards versus limits. Conditions have exposed negative research word reduces class and specificity. Second is ground. Conditions create bidirectional cases for a stable basis of negative preparation. Next off is the reassurance. DA reducing alliance commitments to NATO necessitates nuclear reassurances. Fueling and near 16 expansion into umbrella through deployment nuclear system on under Russia's U.S. alliance taking out confidence and significant commitments international means that it enhances under the threat of perception discern priorities NATO develop nuclear alliance from bargains about the posture or rise of country Washington may be back down alliance commitments effort to bargain and security guarantees become more intense cases of abandonment gross fears to have not originally nuclear fear indicated USA living in a mid concern credibility assurances nuclear measures they remain committed to NATO disagreements threatening reputation not just in alliance attention U.S. commitment has serious conflict perception allied commence discussion of B61 and B games important for indicating nuclear forces pullback signal meet security councils departure content alleviated ally concerns and the plan causes the U.S. to reassure Poland with tactical nuclear weapons sour and 16 each year facing the NATO to reassure the United States satisfied demand reinforcement as calling to the nuclear process that would strengthen nuclear weapons and basing the alliance and defense under U.S. secondary defense state NATO should consider a supplementary to the property saying nuclear attack nuclear weapons in Poland. NATO is speaking of nuclear posture Poland F-16 participate on nuclear strike. There's no consensus B61 in Eastern Europe about engaging Russian nuclear doctrine limit strikes arguing both houses strengthening policy to reassure Eastern Europe argue that they would argue Europe close to Russian invade the USSR 1 degree in Article 5 will adequate lead nuclear problem in the form of U.S. second Putin will be the Baltic States from here and tactical nuclear weapons in Poland causes Russian preemptive strike and destroys NATO that causes extinction. Pfizer in 20 moving nuclear weapons in Poland would be problematic would be expensive. U.S. NATO really far precedent by B61 but would make it vulnerable to the Russian preemptive attack Baltic missiles and Kaliningrad would strike all Poland within its ball. There's place to locate with the range of Russian anti-aircraft missile will be hungry to Russia. The Cuban Missile Crisis nuclear weapons in Poland provide decisive within NATO member states and stated no intention incorporating the founding act of bombs will divide the ounce question U.S. judgment and broader nuclear debate. Next off is the offer counterplan. The United States the federal government should offer the North Atlantic Council to restrict activation of Article 5 with the North Atlantic Treaty in Russia-controlled territories in the North Atlantic area. The plan disrupts collective decision-making. That turns the case Kuhn in the 18th. That would be also NATO to the U.S. bypass command and if United independently doing so would be politically priced rendering NATO's collective decision-making and they see absolutely all military crisis planning depends on NATO politically agreeing into collective decision-making prevents alliance fracture. Allude in 11 analysis and situating the nature of the working alliances, the framework structure, norms, influence in the development of alliances, and refers to the process explaining the gap between the aspirations, activities, the principle, fundamental, and NATO's policy making a translated link between common values, commitment to a collective through Article 5, the consensus process of all reconciliation of national priorities. The advantage one first, NATO says no and assesses causes war. Kaczynski in 20 countries unclear whether the model would gain bargaining support for all NATO members until territories between Russia's veto power over Georgia. NATO membership stretches beyond territorial conflict. Russia opposes membership under any circumstances. Germany and France are opponents of member are granted that would promote Russia unnecessary position has not changed Russia's asserted that Georgia's membership including ordering Georgia's accession would cause a terrible conflict would be NATO's false hope line towards Russia majority of NATO ever since Georgia's membership as long as NATO has the veto power undermining NATO's credibility in Georgia. Second, Turkey checks back Black Sea deterrence in anti-Turkey arguments more strategic important territory in the world. The only state in the Middle East, Syria, and Iraq, Lebanon, and Israel control the Bosphorus space and access to the desert space between Black Sea and Mediterranean give the capability to contain Russia's powerful Black Sea fleet that anchored NATO south into the flag aircraft and ports supporting NATO's operations over the Middle East, Black Sea, and the Balkans. 3, no adventurism and energy diversification now. Kablin and 20 other parts of identification of energy and increase the energy exploitation in adjacent waters. The government signed an agreement which altered the exclusive economic region prompted to blockade Qatar to Turkey with defending stuff showing up its position. Behind what appears to be aggression, foreign policy, defensive pragmatism, Turkey can have been forced to external circumstances rather than expansionism. 4, Afghan stability now. Kurgan and 16 current key sides on the positivity future. The return to continuity freedom to enable a project completion. Afghanistan to follow the goods or membership of WTO, improve confidence in Afghan stability, become a viable economic partner, generating capacity towards near-term growth with also Afghanistan prime to suggesting improving governance conditions can be in medium and long terms. 5, no Mediterranean escalation, cooperation between all parties and high and facilitated by NATO. Shakri energy NATO expanding cooperation. NATO welcome parties to increasing including surveillance in Israel, Marco, Ukraine, Russia, and Algeria express interest in the parties of partners to to NATO. NATO not officially ending the actions to ensure terrorist threat. Advantage 2, 1, no Nagorno-Karabakh war. Word 1110 the war between American and the American Prime Minister signed a peace deal. American minister the peace deal credits Azerbaijan's victory of war connecting countries that will enhance the territorial integrity. Cameron will maintain key keepers in charge of advances to defend Armenia. The force will oversee construction of road. Turkey will join PAC make your center with the Russia. Second, Georgia doesn't contribute to regional security. Ruger amended in 511. Georgia is a weak country. Is a strategic back power. It has a strong economy and security liability. Georgia military performed poorly. Lack of force multipliers. This land only slighter water. The West Virginia's economy is half that Georgia has some ability, but hardly enough to matter. 3, no organized crime impact. 1, AC card is word salad. Government regulation prevent escalation. 4, hybrid war is an effective Lenoska. 4, 7, hybrid tactics limit influence. Public opinion remains supportive of NATO society and incorporate against Russian disinformation. There's growing constantly seeing Russian adversarial terms of focus over replace it. Replicating Crimea. Russia's and Crimea generally sympathetic. Russia does not have an existing presence in the Baltic countries. 5, not revisionist. They only want a limited sphere of influence. Crimea was a special case, and their hypothesis is essentialist goats. And Merlin 19's respectable revisions. Russia perspective that opts overly deterministic position, which negates the open-ended character by undermining the predictor course that supporting unchanging essence of Russia. This view that fails extreme rationalists, not supposed to know Russian history, single stream that connects Putin. Like this thought of essentialist Moscow attempt to fluctuate over time. The intervention in Ukraine has remained limited. Example, Moscow's alternative or revisionist Russia and influence in Moscow altered North rent LWO and ACR were global by revisionist into Moscow's more an ordinary great power. This Goats and Moron card is marked at ordinary great power. I can mark it and send it out in the email chain quickly. But I'm ready for cross-ex.
I think we got the mark, unless
yeah, there's like 5 words left after that.
All right. You're good for cross-ex.
Yep.
Okay. First, the advantage counterplan.
Yep.
Designate Georgia as a U.S. ally. Does that mean defense pact? Does that just mean like cooperation? What does that entail?
So it definitely doesn't mean a defense pact. Our Kachali evidence describes it most similarly to Taiwan, right? So they're no longer just a strategic partner, but the United States military ally. This would include things like arm transfers, etc.
To be a mutual defense obligation.
Do we have a mutual defense obligation with Georgia after the
So
counterplan?
we do not create a NATO-like expansion to Georgia. The counterplan does not do that. The counterplan treats Georgia like it's Taiwan.
Nick, you misunderstand my question. I'm
Yeah.
asking, is there something akin to like Article 5 or like of any treaty that's like, if Georgia is now attacked by Russia, the U.S. is obligated to defend them?
The counterplan does not create an
No. And real quick, like just to be clear, it's a Taiwan-like arrangement.
Yeah.
So it's like we don't have to intervene if Georgia's attacked, but you also, just to be clear, you don't have that sort of
Whoa.
that
But
Article
the
5 key.
Taiwan Treaty does obligate a U.S.
No, that does not.
response.
That is. Wait. The Taiwan Treaty is not a defense
Okay.
fact.
So
No, it is
just
not.
to be clear, the counterplan. In any world, can the United States, under that treaty, come to the defense of Georgia?
Obviously, the U.S. could come to the defense of Georgia, given that they'd be a military ally. The counterplan does not obligate the United States.
Okay.
Cool.
Fine. The expansion DA?
Yeah.
Bayev card, I'm confused where you think you've made a link argument. I'd just like to clarify.
Yeah. So the Russian leadership reacted to NATO, green light, and intervention in Libya, and then condemning mission creep. Our argument is that the plan is an example of mission creep that Russia perceives and causes counterbalancing throughout the Middle East.
Have you read uniqueness evidence about mission creep, given that the only link argument you've cited is about a previous NATO intervention in Libya?
No, this card also talks about Georgia.
You've highlighted one line. Before it's like Ukraine is the key focus for Russia's strategic attention. It's just like Georgia is in political disarray. Like, not a link argument, just a statement.
I think that this card is pretty clear that Russia would view further enlargement of NATO as mission creep, which would cause
that gets to my question. It's like further enlargement. Your evidence is just Russia views current NATO actions as escalatory. What's the threshold? What's the brink?
We
Membership or threat. Membership or threat of membership.
Why?
Is what it would be.
What do you mean why?
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
There's no
It's
card.
further encroachment upon Russia's border, diminishes their sphere of influence. This is also the first card we read on the Georgia advantage, the Galachi card.
Okay. What's the status of everything?
The status quo is always an option.
Can you kick planks for the advantage counterplan?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. T reduce.
Yep.
Just like reverting to the baseline number of circumstances argument.
Yes.
I guess I'm a bit confused about how this interacts with the rest of the topic. Like baseline number of circumstances is certainly modified by the plan. What are like other affirmatives that you think don't meet this interpretation?
The plan does not modify a baseline number of circumstances because if those territories are no longer controlled by Russia, the United States is free to respond.
Okay. Do you need prep?
Yeah.
We're taking prep 10 minutes.
We stopped it like a second ago. It's at 8:06. Doc is sending. I'm just gonna get set up. What? Unmute. No. While I'm setting up the stand, give the order. It'll be Georgia advantage, the frozen conflicts advantage, then it'll be T. After that, it'll be the offer to NATO / NAC counterplan.
I lost you at T.
Then it'll be
Dallas said lost you at T.
yeah, T. Then the offer counterplan. Then the advantage counterplan. The Polish reassurance DA. And then the expansion bad DA.
Do you not have a microphone that fits on your head?
Here, he asked you. He wants to know if you have a microphone or not. Explain the mic to that one.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we use one mic just because it's easy, because we only have one mic stand. So we share a microphone.
Okay, that's fine. But you're fading in and out real bad. Couldn't understand you.
Yeah, sorry. I think that was just because I was
roadmap.
moving around, setting up the
Okay,
stand.
as long as you're sure of that, but it's your neck if you're wrong.
Yep, I got you. Is everybody good to go?
Yeah, I'm good.
Once I need to get the doc.
Okay. Okay. It'll echo. Nick, you good? Cool. NATO says yes to the plan. The U.S. is the leader of the entire global order and the primary leader of NATO. That any move by the U.S. in order to assure Georgia integration within NATO ensures acquiescence, even if both France and Germany challenge it at first. The U.S. will eventually get on the board. Leadership overcomes NATO opposition. Coffee 18. Georgia has a NATO card. Leader expand capital. Move the ball very clear. No local statement by Harrison making the case that let's for President Public and NATO will agree to revise accession protocol for Georgia, but U.S. leadership is key. Coffee 20. NATO may not be least part of any Article 6 process would require strong leadership journey. And France will objective parliament process. They expect to meaningful push. And alternative proposals crucial. U.S. leverage relations and clear signal of a path to membership is sufficient. Williamson 3-3. Georgia believe having more about to NATO to progress and decisively risk NATO credibility toward Russia. Aggression and door must remain open to at the very least Georgia own a greater clarity and war argument. All answer it later. The Turkey solves its wrong. Key straits and resource hubs within Georgia are necessary. That projects and Turkey's not helping now. Will agree to deterrence and the counterplan. No counterplans resolve it. Mediterranean energy issues will escalate, bring ship of little pressures, cause access and miscal converging interest wrong great powers. Their cars only about Turkey, not about any other states in the region. And Turkey will be aggressive, proven by ongoing actions. Afghan instability will escalate. Obi-Wan loose nukes. Terrorists cause use of lucid accents and misattribution. Two great powers. Proximity and geostrategic competition. It's the only way to maintain stability, even if it's stable now, won't be in the future due to inevitable U.S. withdrawal requires Senate continue resource supply to the area independently. The direction of the Black Sea, the impact is coming now. One, Russia's gearing up, merchant units building high conventional weapons shows full invasions coming. Two, external triggers, Syria, destined separatism, remaining resource grabs are likely soon. Three, Iran regional comments are independent of Russia. It goes nuclear, proximity, regional forces coupled with disruptive tech conditions over escalation control, Russian gas flaring causes quick and exponential spikes in environmental destruction, Arctic melting, aerosol water pollution, all cause extinction. Drop that impact. The frozen conflicts advantage at the top. Nagorno-Karabakh conflict goes nuclear. Russia uses renditive force to overwhelm others and draw on both sides allies. Georgia's not useless, but that's relevant to this advantage. I answered it above. Organized crime causes extinction. Dexico governance drives instability. Our card is highly qualified, not just a bunch of blips. Hybrid war useless. It works in Georgia. Recency of democratic protests proves that's relevant, and also the 1AC evidence I'll finish later. The Russia not revisionist doesn't matter. Doesn't implicate any of the 1AC. Russia does, however, perceive certain strategic incentives within certain regions as all the 1AC evidence. Iran war goes nuclear due to mutual disincentives to de-escalate, causes miscalculated accidents, ensures a nuclear conflict independently drop territorial conflicts resolution mechanisms, script for global territorial conflicts passed by East Asia, the Middle East, Americas, and Europe. I'm going to finish the 1AC card that David didn't get to. Russia continue to change their Georgia foreign policy. Can improve effective. T. 1, we meet. The plan removes the current applicability of Article 5 to Russian-controlled territories in the North Atlantic. Article 6 is expansive without caveat and defines present obligations. It's not an enlargement act that prevents a future increase as Coffee Imperial. We do not lose to their interpretation. The act is not a conditions act. Does not set a certain condition. It just says that anything that's currently Russian-controlled territory cannot be applied. We do not then fiat the reapplication of Article 5 to anything. The act is solely a reduction. Next, 2, counter limits to extend Mona Lisa 1 definitions of the key terms reveal limits to define extent of enlargement, and that includes specifying a geographic scope of education. Activation Kim 11 alliance contract specifying conditions of activation, for example, adversary specific location on provocation. 3, that's best. A, ground over limited topics encourage creativity, undermine creativity, fairness, outweighs limits because a topic lit is biased. Neg, B, no limits inclusions, only 3 European aspirants. C, no ground loss. Assurance, which Russia distance, alliance specific how all apply. 4, reduce modified alliance terms with written agreements with allies. 16, commitments to find an arrangement to act in a certain way, for contract agreement between allies. The plan removes that. Low cost 10, NATO promise of membership for Georgia and made in no sense that Bucharest leaders adopt a declaration that Georgia is guaranteed will be affected by lack of control of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Reduce means the cost to grow less. We're good 13 to grow less, and 5 reasonability can be described as substance. NAC counterplan or offer counterplan. Perm to both is perceived as compliance. Perm to the counterplan reduces result of not a process. Cluster 16 to less than weight is an amount. It must be via text and function. Key to AF ground research ability. Recommend counterplan as a voting issue for clash. That feels the AF feels ground versus topics of education. Double bind. Either allies say no since you know how to use sections necessary to compel support. That's coffee and coffee. 18 for Georgia reset would require you leader upon a line of trouble. SPC actually sorry scratch that. I read the card earlier in the one on the case page. Or it links to that benefit since it receives corrosing ally compliance. Cancel the F1 delay. Black Sea combat comes now. Kaishek 20 decision and they see always the consensus must agree. Rest agree decision consensus time gets when you construct often. I think yours reaches to certainty. A Georgia advantage perception of whole government source key to successful session counter bolsters Russian coercion. That's Wilson. B frozen competency advantage. Carol 9 openness to club does not mean foreign countries have hold the vote over you. So for foreign policy, make a mockery of foreign policy to show credibility on the one side of the nations and perm do the plan and other stuff to the NEC app is not key. Limited functional intrinsic checks arbitrary benefits to remain as perm. Do the plan through the proposal to the through an offer to the NEC. Immediacy is a bad standard. One shot use of the NEC is insufficient to solve or set precedent for broader spillover, and there's no impact once they read. Real ones will answer them in the 1 hour. Advantage counterplan. Perm do both solves the net benefit. Perm do the counterplan and links to the benefit because it results in the U.S. doing random treaty things, which assures all the dissets. Also, Article 8 means that it means that Georgia can never join NATO because you can't have completely deflating treaties. Means that you also had to revoke its bilateral defense pact, which is obviously links to that benefit, or cannot solve any of the AF hybrid, where it takes out all the solvency because it means that Georgia a lack of the clear pathway to accession to Georgia means that none of Georgians believe the counterplan to be credible because they believe it as just another small incremental step with the U.S. waving them off in the face of their true demand to clear path the NATO right membership is key. Control leaving Kulik and 10 peaceful resolution potential. A platform is something. It's naive to think the West will away from Russia. Harkins elements of Georgia not have upper hand in NATO. Georgia's targets for membership and maintaining that should have efforts for other parties. Win over exhausted public NATO. So always careful not to give Russia semblance of a veto. Georgia's that might have levels looking for recognition. Certain skeptics of future with better Moscow concludes Georgia's attraction in NATO will lose motivation for middling separatists and failure and bold Moscow to interfere more than forces who have argued Georgia can never count the West go alone again. Upper hand only an effective. Georgia says no. GJ 21. Georgia Parliament adopted resolution for policy which defines the key forms of membership and does not have any alternative. Georgia will ensure the readiness for membership in accordance with the OA summit, and it's also key to the Black Sea conflict. The 1AC evidence indicates that you need to create integration between all NATO allies, not just Georgia and the United States itself, because you need a full spectrum system of deterrence. Indicated by their own argument that says that other NATO countries do matter. They do matter, but need to be linked up with Georgia, which the comment does not result in accession. It's also key to fully reverse the precedent for frozen conflicts. At all 20, most powerful NATO consent would be present. MAPD issue of membership was used with justify Russia's aggression denied to lead to the further aggression. Represented factor Russian veto over large Trigo, blow down alliances core. The energy plan cannot solve any of it. It requires the transition time between those two things, and in the interim, Russia will engage in gas flaring. In fact, it causes it to happen much faster. It causes environmental devastation. That's the logical implication of the counterplan cannot result in an absolute shift immediately, and doesn't create new pathways which are necessary to further energy integration. Creates alignment between the U.S. and Georgia. Even if it results in some sort of energy independence, some will still be dependent on Russia because they choose to, prove by Nord Stream 2 in Germany, and conditionality is a voting issue for deterrence. We see how much strategy, Charlotte, when it's autonomous research, incoherent positions, restores a strategy, truth, authentication, counter disso solves. Reassurance is that. Assurance is thumb now. Canceled everyone's region withdrawal. The plan revised by adding presence to the region. That's Cohen. Failure to act breaks the commitment of Topicality 19. Invasion of Georgia. Automatic liberal order. NATO's failure to defend a blow to Moscow. NATO should fully offer membership to increase the U.S. credit on security and send the right message. And membership increases credit of liable partner. Will reassure allies who faces the threats in the Middle East and Europe where U.S. and all countries uphold humans. Also increase reputation. And dependable. Modifying Article 6 sends a signal strength by reaffirming NATO flexibility. That's Golly hair plan. Won't undermine credibility. Coffee 19. NATO could amend Article 6 to exclude Russia by territory. This will work precedent for Turkey and Greece and Algeria. Countless examples do not have all territory. And Article 5 Guam and Falkland Islands. East Germany. A number of free because he does not want use for force. And the plan increases credit for instance 17 notion of credible cost and prolife. Then take off the use of back away movements, rest on shaky foundations. I see higher credit, more interest in KG, even if just a man in center. Certain allies who remain attack and increase their credit guarantees their remaining members since the proportion larger stake is a shrunken NATO witnesses some abandonment. Maybe the committee becomes more and not less credible. The CE supports the plan of specifically Poland coffee 20 many regardless of winning Georgia CE states with generally so supportive of amending to amend Georgia was sent a message to Moscow no longer has de facto veto on enlargement and no Polish nuclear deployment. Pulaski 20 Poland nuclear sharing has been subject to debate without any concrete sense whether Europe would certainly pose a solution. NATO Russia founding act includes a clear declaration allies are not planning a nuclear assistance territory, new states of potential would not be possible. The majority of the program would be very difficult. Poland will also require new steps for technical, political, along with private and TNW's impact is stumped. Caster 20. We're in blue. In 2018, NPR trumpeted a plan to develop a low-yield nuclear weapons that the low-yield was successfully deployed as the U.S. moves forward to developing and deploying Soviet nuclear and the expansion of GA. Russia won't react aggressively. Schultz said out 21. Likely Russia threatened to protect Russians legally territories belong to Georgia. The community has been a larger advantage. Russia has setbacks in Syria, Libya, Belarus, and the Donbass occupations costing billions. 10K has a presence that don't think Putin wants this to erupt because of COVID. The econ is just another problem Russia's having to deal with. It mysteries history. Schultz said out 21. Let's not forget who the aggressor was. Russia invaded occupying territory. The NATO sent the big signals. How push Putin even playing for such an incursion for some time. Russia possibly wait for the right to take advantage. And Biden makes encirclement inevitable. German 11-11. Biden described Russia as the biggest threat to U.S. security. Promised to join forces against Kremlin. Not welcome Biden's desire to repair the NATO strength in the alliance. Kremlin views as a challenge to security. That outweighs Lamro. 21 Putin sees NATO troop build up in the Baltics and Poland as a direct threat. Taco who rarely materializes, and in NATO's emphasis on cyber terrorism as evidence Russia insufficiently to observe NATO detention reminds Putin and Russia's power deserves to be among a great powers in a session. Now is better than later. In the Noska 20, enlargement was reasonable over disasters incorporating former Soviet countries that mitigate security limits of Russia pose a long-term threat. Why postpone and no impact on Russian democracy. In the Noska 20 claim is questionable. Yeltsin undermined democracy where NATO grievances were restricted to policy surveys where the voters made their choice on the belief that yes pro West and Putin said no concerns about expansion and the Syria impacts wrong. Escalation won't happen now. They won't go to war because there's a bunch of countervailing incentives. 1 second, David. If Russia's defensive, like their own evidence says they won't conduct preventative strikes and mutual incentives, they won't risk war. David, doing that card, he'll send this out. Still on this page. Over. Conflict in Syria will never escalate. Eisenhower 18 after a week of rhetorical escalation, missile strikes and were finally carried out. Russian leadership resolved the attack on the damaging solution for the domestic troubles Trump was facing Moscow understood the destruction of Syria not really retribution for the alleged use of chemical weapons and not attempt to influence outcomes Syrian conflicts. Simply a demonstration of force of fact that Washington to undertake the strikes was perceived in Moscow's manifestation weakness and decisiveness, which gave confidence to the Russian leadership. Result Moscow forwarded hostile rhetoric that assured no damage was done to Russian assets. These strikes were the solution for both the East entrance. Moscow retained the status quo and Syria. Washington fulfilled its promise to take account the U.S. Consider military intervention. Moscow's no choice with the bluff of counter measures. Nothing happened because there are no threat to Russian military facilities. Despite a rhetoric, Russian leadership trying to not cross the line, provoke a direct confrontation would mean a complete defeat for Russia. Market defeat for Russia. David will send that out. He also.
Yeah, if you could just toss that out before cross-ex, that'd be great.
I'm sorry, the last card is not in the speech doc.
Yeah,
No, David just sent it.
Got it.
And I'm good whenever, Nick.
Yeah, give me a second. I haven't gotten it yet. There it is. Perfect. All right, we all good?
Yep.
Awesome. Say no stuff on case. Can you win your advantage even if other NATO members say no?
Can we win our advantage if we can win? We can win components of our advantage.
Why?
Because a large chunk of the advantage is also premised on the credible signal of Georgia potentially receiving membership. So the piece of evidence that we have read, the Williams 3-3 card, is indicative of ongoing disputes within Georgia internally and indicates that the way to sort of ensure that Georgia is continuing their tilt towards the West is to end this procrastination of being indecisive about whether or not we are going to let Georgia in and instead clarify and forward a position that would allow the possibility of them being introduced. So, for example, the plan.
Perfect. Advantage counterplan that you got Yabalski card from 11 years ago. What is the warrant in this card for why NATO membership is necessary? It seems to be quite just like talking pretty about, we should recognize the importance of Georgia. Why is accession necessary from this piece of evidence?
Yeah, so I agree with you that it's from 10. The reason why it's important is because it's connected as well to the Williams card and also the last card we read in the 1AC, which are all both from March of this year. The argument that is making is about domestic politics within Georgia and whether or not they are willing to realign and engage with the West. The thing that they have been promised since 2008 is NATO membership. Everything that we've done since then has not been indicative that we are wanting them to join NATO. That is a promise that we made to them. They have codified that they want that in their constitution.
That leads me to my next question. How are you saying Georgia says no on this counterplan? I don't understand. Like, first of all,
because the counterplan does not give them NATO. The counterplan only gives them a bilateral alliance with the U.S. So the thing they don't care about is that they want because they want full integration with the West. They think that piecemeal measures like the counterplan are an example of the nonsense that the West has been conducting since 2008. And we've also made an argument in the 1AC that says that Russian hybrid tactics exploit the fissure in between something less than membership and membership in order to pull them away.
Slow down. Where do you think this JG card says that Georgia will reject an opportunity to become a military ally with the United States because of the nonsense the West has done since 2008?
So we don't think this card independently does it itself. This card is just adding the warrant that they
codified
in their
What card
constitution.
do you think you've read that says anything close to the claim that you just asserted in cross?
The combination of the GJ card,
The
So we just
Yakovlevy
established that the GJ card doesn't say that.
I said in conjunction, the GJ
Okay.
card, the Yakov-Shvabashvili and Kulik 10 card.
Okay,
the-
let's start there. That was where I kind of started. Where does this say that?
yeah, you're misunderstanding the argument. It's not just like the leadership in Georgia says no. It's about the domestic political pressure on whether or not they should join this defense pact with the U.S. Our argument is that domestic politics would shift in a way that would say this counterplan is a bad idea. You cannot vote on this. There's a political cost to you voting on this and agreeing to join this alliance.
Last question. Lenoska cards you've read on the expansion DA is accession now is better than later. Have you made an inevitability claim that Georgia will eventually get added to NATO?
So the argument is that if you are correct that Russia is so fear-mongering and decisive against these certain states, then it is better to add them now than to wait later for an inevitable crisis because Russia's bonkers and want to just like attack countries.
Okay. 10 minutes. We have 808.
It's sent. The order is the advantage counterplan. The offer counterplan. Georgia advantage. The pros and cons advantage. Are we all good?
My little thing's going round and round like it wants to download it, but it hasn't yet, but that's okay. I'm fine. I'll mute myself.
Cool. The Counterpoint designates Georgia as a bilateral ally that solves the advocating all the potential benefits of membership without angering Russia. Second, sufficient framing. The 2AC did not read a single R differentiating NATO membership from bilateral membership. They just have evidence that says membership could. They don't have any evidence that membership is necessary to solve, just that it's potentially sufficient. The counterpoint is also sufficient to be able to solve because they don't have a card differentiating the plan for the counterpoint. Now 2C1 was permutation to both that links to the net benefit because it threatens to add Georgia as a member to NATO. 2C2 is permutation to the counterpoint that severs our limiting Article 5 command. That's a voter for negative round. 2C3 is that it links to the net benefit. 1 equilibrium. The counterpoint is bilateralism strikes the right balance between terms and accommodation. Degree 20 Russia the counterpoint of the transatlantic emissions use external bilateralism Georgia democracy trouble the region. Terrorism priority energy transatlantic for and Central Asia. Give us help. All the factors like NATO membership politically invisible would be all been resolved expanding NATO objectives equally between the class for security and Russia diverse informal ways of promoting integration may be favourable to ethics of boost security while letting modest Friday anti-terrorism control airspace residential music agreement enhance intelligence counterterrorism. Second, the counterpoint uniquely avoids encircling Russia by creating a Finland style buffer zone. NATO expansion triggers closing window of opportunity dynamics tailored on 20 criminal started threatening countries in the sphere of threatening NATO with the U.S. Fisher summit to declare the word become a member of NATO. Decision about the backdrop of Russian military events. So why not acknowledge the reality and take the false record of the table forever to use would ruin rational ways of Russian features. So better models of Finland which would the next president might give it the short that you would not pursue NATO enlargement. 2AC4 is this Article 8 keyword. 1, there was not a card right here. This was a blip in the 2AC. This becomes something it's totally different than 1AR. Then we obviously get new answers. Second, the counterpoint bilateral investments are sufficient to solve. They don't have a reason this Article 8 thing is necessary to be able to deter Russia or solve any of the frozen conflict stuff. 2AC5 is a hybrid war stuff. 1, integrating Georgia as a bilateral ally is more than sufficient to be able to solve hybrid war because we provide them the necessary resources to stop Russian incursions. That was the 2 cards I read above. Second, MMA status is sustainable. Makes insurance without provoking the bear. Arbitrum 13 MMA status where as a package solution to the Russian Germany MMA designation reinforces strong bilateral relationship with the US and the ally status will not replace the joint NATO designation for Georgia when investment table and the what else good cooperation? How status for Georgia with formalized use for violate the overall balance of power. 3 bilateral commitments can solve Russian coercion. 70 whether if the U.S. is using Georgia one another on help meaning shooting alliance country to work for the best way to free future college membership resolve the federal the decision offer Georgia membership like if you know the check Russia on the board the use military on the military performance use on ready card will commit the case of Georgia it can work. 6 they also just don't have a card about hybrid war and about distinguishing bilateral and NATO membership, so this is largely irrelevant. 2AC6 is that Georgia would not believe it is credible. 1, yes they would. Our evidence says that they like bilateral integration plans, that they would appreciate the U.S. designating as an ally. They would believe designating as an ally. Second, even if Georgia does not think it is as credible as NATO membership, it is sufficient for them to quell any fears they have as well as resolve the internal today. 2AC7 is this membership key card. 1, the actual only warrant in this card, it says quote Georgia wants recognition. The counterpoint provides them that recognition by designating them as a bilateral ally. Second, all the warrants of this card are just optimistic about Georgia joining NATO. None of these is differentiating the plan from the counterpoint or saying that membership is necessary for to be able to solve. 2AC8 is that NATO would say no. 1, no card for the 2AC8 was Georgia says no. 1, this just says that Georgia has had a document promoting NATO membership, not that they would say no to a bilateral arrangement or designation as a U.S. ally. 2AC9 is that other NATO countries are key. This is a nonsense warrant just made up in the 2AC. With the U.S. can obviously make the necessary supplements, even if Georgia needs to cooperate with other NATO allies. Second, if other countries can solve, then obviously their advantage is non-existent. 2AC10 is that it's key to frozen conflicts. This once again demonstrates the necessary versus sufficient distinction here. The first line of this card is quote most NATO membership would be the most powerful signal, not that it is a necessary signal. Designating Georgia as a bilateral ally provides the necessary integration that is necessary. No solving. Second, bilateral hub and spokes is Goldilocks. 18 hub and spokes. Federal system regional security grounded national self-service hub and spokes encourages each country to maintain capacity to defend themselves. Long-term perspective, education, more effective use of Japanese hub and spokes Germany. See like political will. European hub and spokes are shared with me. The end of NATO create. Take for NATO goes when members who unwillingly radical companies. These men surely where there's armed forces. Most NATO allies talk. Armed forces really time for NATO. 2.2C11, we're kicking the energy plank. It's not necessary to solve the advantage because the internal link is still about integrating Georgia for energy routes. So we still solve that. 2AC12 was conditionality. Condo is good. We get what we did. 1, Netflix. The neg's always reactive. The advocates is 2 aren't infinite prep to take out 2AC strategy. Condo resource competitive equity. Second, negation. They only have to disprove the condo stimulus effective negation by testing for multiple angles or interface clash by insulating the case from contradiction. 3, they read a new plan and new cards on the advantages, so obviously we get to do a little bit of one. We want 4, reasonability, add-on term, straight turning a debit, and so we're checking 5, 5, reject the argument out to team, 5, reject the argument out to team. 6, if they said dispo, that doesn't solve Netflix because Amos, you have to force terms, the offer counterpoint ticket, we're not going for it. Any new cross application justifying new 2, and our responses theory was just is just the recommend theory is just a reason, and any other theory is just a reason. Reject the argument, not the team. The Georgia advantage at the top. The advantage is illogical. There is not a Georgia key warrant for any of their internal links.
conflicts. They may have evidence that Georgia could be useful to reinforce these regions. Not that they are necessary. The Black Sea, we have Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, etc., all of which that cover far more of the perimeter of the Black Sea. Even if Russia could make encroachments, obviously all those other countries would check them as they have been doing so for the last 70 years. The Afghanistan stuff, we've been using Pakistan for 20 years. Why do we suddenly need to change it to a Georgian route through Georgian route through? It is utterly illogical to suggest that just because Georgia could be a way of reinforcing it, that it is necessary to be able to reinforce it. Now, I want to see one. NATO says no. France and Germany don't want to provoke Russia. Essentially cause a conflict because Russia has declared an explicit red line as a second. Even if the plan doesn't solve it, their evidence decries NATO's failure to see Georgia in 2008 does not declare. It does not say that declaring Abkhazia and South Ossetia as outside Article 5 facilitates membership. B, if they are right that Putin wants to expand into the Caucasus, the plan encourages him because it sees Georgian territories to him. This also means that Georgia would say no because they obviously don't want NATO to give tribes the territories to Putin. 3, abandoning Georgia territory including reduces chance of membership. Status quo solve better. Plan increases Russia's veto power. 20. This view receives the territory out of the issue. Even if political separatists don't want to go Russia, would agree to consider giving Georgia's entry. Even if Georgia would give up territory, I'll drop the protection of Georgian membership. NATO would unlook and step Moscow. I'll drop the Georgia back into the orbit solution and political parties south under the European Union. Actually, opening the Russian interface with Jordan initially, not only before hybrid dimension. Media money increases in Western and pro-Russian discourse in Jordan media. 4, Russia will leverage energy markets to say no. 19 Russia, one of the most leading British national guys that come and leaves European countries depends on political advantage from 1990 to 2008. Russia got off the Trump against European countries 20 times European Union. Kill the competitive first Russia need. I'll convince the majority of NATO members to vote against Georgia. Did you convince one Russia to throw going last small to force it into voting against Georgian membership? Now, if they try to do something sneaky and concede say no here, that takes out the entire app because if Georgia's not integrated, then obviously they can't solve any of the sort of frozen conflict stuff as well as deterrence. But if it's just about the signal, then obviously we still have our DNA links to the signal too. Now, no Mediterranean conflict. NATO's coordinating with all relevant parties to ensure threats are deterred. That's true. Turkey is also helping diversify energy, prevent escalation. Even if there were about to be a war, that's Kaplan second strong incentives. Escalation, tangible ATD, they're strong incentive parties. The Canadian resolution back into war with Turkey, Germany, holding the EU position. The Canadian bar is close to the EU. Turkey's not caused that line. 3, no conflict. It's all posturing. Now, 95 for another France, Turkey, no one to conflict all sides of the Mediterranean. Need for all negotiations of trip operation looking for leverage and Erdogan the majority go to waste. 4, the Mediterranean stable. On 1908 after the on 9/11 democratic years coherence as a result of the expanded co-op, especially in the Mediterranean, the success maintained security successfully inserted in the multiple best person help disaster relief. His operation no plot has been directed since the beginning of the op. Prevented activities. Extend 1 and see 4. I think Afghanistan is stable now. President Ghani's reforms overcome obstacles by fixing conflicts, expanded the economy, and completing projects. Newfound WTO membership and vast fuel reserve is still out economic strength. That's great. And second, Afghanistan is stabilizing carbon. Or actually, don't need that card. The Russian flaring impacts of Corona, thumps, and EMP. Dies the backers and 20 number of flames of Russian gas number of factors including drop in oil gas prices like of gas pipeline during the pandemic. The frozen conflict advantage. What I said 1 and see 1. NATO Georgia doesn't improve deterrence. It undercuts it. That's a small economy, weak military. Inside of Western NATO, that's Ruger. That takes out advantage 1 because it means they can't resolve any of the deterrence interlinks, but it also means they can't resolve any of the sort of frozen conflict moderating stuff because people will still secede because they don't believe that Georgia joining NATO is credible. Second, enlargement causes free riding, collective action, mob offensive enlargement materials, two part of the line, 30 members want to get self-take. They can officer pick up the second Britain first. Interpretation to force enlargement, read for the circle on 70 spreading, seven crazy, Germany was looking at the actual Britain first, and Italy, like the United States, looking for the reason why you're living where you've been housed. As in every straight out of the result leaves the United States oppose 10, 1, 2, and 3. 1, states are inculcated against Russian disinformation. They have Western media unlike in Crimea. Second, Russia is not revisionist. Their theories are socializing, ignores inconsistent Russian actions. Poking the war, bear makes war likely. That's a good evidence. And finishing that card, discrediting Russia conservative of NATO. As the Russian Mark 3, hybrid war fails in Georgia explicitly, which answers 2 is a warrant. Sorry, 1930 limits operating with national conflict, election, limited effect with unlikely lasting result. Is the right side in 2008 Russian military acted by Georgia or Russia was unable to vote to recourse to armed conflict offers. Our greatest conflict researchers want to tell the balance decisively in favor of their separatists. 4, if we win the hybrid war is ineffective, it takes out all the modeling stuff. It means they can't solve any of the sort of conflicts or anything because Russian hybrid war is not effective enough to cause secessionism, etc. 5, no hybrid war, sharp 16 hybrid not limited without extensive military from Russia that hybrid war not makes it the most diplomatic force of hybrid. What do you have that Russia is already connected hybrid? There's major difference between the suburban and the reason or like nothing is in Ukraine is happening to it. Activities do not mirror the label conventionalism is wrong. Extend 1 and C1. No Nagorno-Karabakh war. It's the size of Delaware and has a population half the size of Lexington, Kentucky. No one is launching a nuke over it. In every skirmish since the Cold War proves conflict results from Pedro ceasefire. Second, all parties agree to peace. Always 11-9 a deal that halted fighting against the reaction results of conflict. Deals prepare for the way of the last military someone to find the ultimate war capture turning part of the show concluded peace. Erdogan held the deal. 7% of them. Russian leaders such supporting cooperation until the agreement was implemented. Cut it, implemented.
You good for cross-ex?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about the advantage counterplan. First, you read this Babones 18 card, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the hub and spoke system that it's referring to is the modification of current European collective defense. Every single line that I can look to is where
that card is just establishing that like a hub and spoke system, i.e., when the U.S. has like allies that are not tied to the larger multilateral security organization, that those are still capable of effective deterrence.
But you're missing my point, Arvin, which is that's what I'm getting at. This card is talking about changing NATO into a hub and spoke system. Every single country that it lists is every single country it lists is an existing NATO member. It does not advocate for the dissolution of NATO. And the title of every single paragraph is NATO.
I get the point you're trying to make. It's that hub and spokes here is being used in reference to Georgia for this example, because it's just demonstrating that if the U.S. has a bilateral ally that it's connected to, it can still achieve the same.
Where do you think this card is about that? This card is about
this is like back to our examples about things like Taiwan, Finland buffer zones, etc.
No. Those are different
being used. Hub and spokes, etc. is being used as an example that the United States can hold a bilateral alliance and achieve the same sort of outcome that it wants to with the multilateral security alliance.
Except this card is only in reference to allies who are already
if your
members
argument
of NATO.
If your argument is that the word Georgia is not in the card, yeah, that's fine. It's not.
Well, I think the point is
that if the United States has hubs,
I want to clarify something. I want to clarify something else. Then this card says that we need to deploy troops. Do you put troops in Georgia?
If we needed to, we could put troops in Georgia. Yes.
Your card says that a component of effective hub and spokes was that
most
NATO allies lack armed force.
Even the one in C card says we could.
I want you to reconcile. Okay, cool. I want you to reconcile that with the Taylor evidence, which says that the only reason why the Kremlin wouldn't get mad at the counterplan is because it'd be akin to Finland. How is putting U.S. troops in sovereign Georgian territory akin to Finland?
It's not troops in the sense like it's an EFP presence in the Baltics where we're getting ready to
you put armed forces.
It's like if we need to, we can put armed forces. That's the point of designating them as a bilateral ally.
Here's the thing I don't understand is that the argument that the Babones card is making is that like we need to do 4 defense things, i.e. we need to put troops in the most confrontational states, which is why it is about Poland and the Baltics. Even if you are correct that it is applicable to Georgia, why does that not mean that you end up putting troops like on the border of Georgia against Russia?
Again, our Dugo evidence actually is pretty good at differentiating this. It says that it seems politically infeasible. One would be ill-advised to test Putin's resolve by expanding NATO. The objective is the right equilibrium between quest for security and Russia's aversion. Informal ways of promoting integration may be fit for bilateral efforts can boost security.
I just want to clarify. I just want to clarify a little bit better what this counterplan actually does in terms of a legal doctrine. You've read a card, the Aberman 19 card, about MNNA status, which is a legal Department of State thing. Will you defend that as what the counterplan does?
We will defend that we designate Georgia as a bilateral ally.
I know it is
Taiwan-like arrangement.
Okay, and that is based in the MNNA agreement, correct?
It could be.
That. Okay, cool.
The card still achieves the purpose of explaining the bilateral ally.
We have 818 real quick. Arvin, I'm going to undeafen myself. $812.
But that's not what you had.
Oh, you're right.
You were at 805.
Yeah, sorry.
Now you're at 750.
Yep, I started at the wrong time. Okay. Okay, I sent it. The order is going to be the Polish reassurance DA, and then you poke the bear expansion DA. Okay, are y'all good? Can I get thumbs up?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm muting.
Awesome. Timer. Cool. Reassurance they concede to AC 6 and 7, no impact to Polish tactical nuclear weapons. The expansion DA at the top first. Middle East war escalates. Nuclear weapons are on the table in Syria. They read the impact card for us. That's the one I see clear evidence says it escalates quickly and causes a global nuclear war. We control the better internal link because Russia will contend the plan is NATO's mission creep, causing counterbalancing throughout the Middle East and causing instability. Second, independent of the Middle East conflict, adding Georgia to NATO causes Russian preemptive strike. The 2AC did not come to grips with this impact argument. Turns the case. It escalates to de-escalate, guarantees nuclear use. That's our 1 and C top evidence. Third is that the impact outweighs their sort of nebulous energy security and organized crime impacts on magnitude. Great power war in Eastern Europe or the Middle East guarantees extinction. Taylor and which nuclear wars will the best likelihood of nuclear war in the Middle East likely comes from the large number of pathways nuclear change the basket each one likely adding up to likelihood of Barber. Then any one scenario line by line 2AC1 is that Russia they say Russia won't react aggressively. First, this evidence is status quo descriptive and doesn't assume the plan, which literally extends NATO upon Russia's border. Second is that structural realism is real. The plan guarantees counterbalancing. Jervis, if 511 the U.S. is exactly normal state that's gained dominant structure, constant realism may be a word for powers most effective counterbalancing. The states makes subject to external relations, few restraints at all. Overwhelming power leads others to balance against increasing power. Perhaps the fierce countries are concerned with their neighborhoods. The war the hegemonic neighborhood that lead to the concern anywhere once the state's interests remain a certain element of the thrusting game. Explore the terminal frontier as the European game elusive and unprecedented, hard to be faced that led to further expansion post-Cold War America. Behave is not coincidental. Third, most importantly, they dropped the moral hazard link argument. Adding Georgia to NATO causes Georgia to be provocative, which is a unique net benefit to the counterplan, and the mere prospect of adding Georgia to NATO destabilizes the Caucasus. Ruger, in 511, Georgia will be difficult to defend 6,000 miles from Russia. The table is less than 120 miles from Russia. Geographic realities create enormous headaches. NATO leads the station troops in Georgia to delay Russian advances. Article 5 encouraged Georgia to engage in reckless driving. The mere possibility of membership emboldened Georgia to drive recklessly in 2008, even emboldening it further, admitting increases the chance of NATO-Russian confrontation. We view the military bloc as a direct threat for, even if they concede, say no in the 1AR. This piece of evidence says the mere prospect of adding Georgia NATO triggers the lane 2AC2. They say we misread history. This proves our argument because it says that the plan makes NATO look aggressive, which guarantees sort of Russian reaction. Second is Russia will preemptively attack to protect itself. Russia in 19 enlargement policy provoked Russia to respond. Georgia in 2008 as well as Crimea. Russia has the same claim and purpose, the same goal as Germany. The West NATO enlargement is a source of conflict for Mearsheimer. There is one way out the south of the land, west side, central, and eastern Europe, including Georgia. Third, adding Georgia contributes to Russia's sense of encirclement. Thales in 2008 NATO released a statement affirming Georgia and Ukraine membership. With this was NATO's most threatening move. Ukraine constitutes an important buffer. France and Nazi Germany invaded Russia through the southeastern Europe. Russia regarded NATO as a direct threat of Russia's goals. The root and defense of realist criminal is attempting to safeguard security, not reclaim empire. Russia is almost destroyed twice by invasions through Eastern Europe. 27 million Russians were killed in World War II. It should be not as hard as the vulnerability so pervades Russian thinking. For stopping at Georgia's key. Kupchin and 17 Americans should target pyramids before NATO enlargement, moving into Georgia and a restrained the Balkan Peninsula. It's 1,000 miles from investing hard to get advantage of the states from Russia, limiting NATO reaches about strategic priorities towards Russia, maintaining collective defense. NATO shall extend territorial guarantees. Russia perhaps difficult to defend. Our elusive commitments question its credibility. Georgia, Ukraine prospective membership. The false host encourages Russian intervention. Clarified members on the cards to encourage Russia to back off. Now, Group 2AC 3 and 4. First, this card is laughable. This evidence just says Biden said Russia is the biggest threat to U.S. national security. That's not the same of encirclement. Second is there's a huge distinction between restoring and expanding. Their evidence is just talking about Biden wanting to repair the NATO alliance post-Trump, not that the alliance would be expanded. And the plan outweighs Biden multilateralism. It's seen as the inevitable march of democracy that causes authoritarian counterbalancing. Martin in 2010, the NATO aircraft from Liberty became one of the most regime states reacting to the same policies Moscow attributed to the Western, the Cold War Revolution, Ukraine, and Georgia, Libya. Influence Moscow's strategic planning. Russia's focus on the authority states globally for restoring Russia's influence and protecting the Kremlin from Western attempts to undermine Putin. The outcome in Libya helps Russia's military support for a civil war. 2AC5, the sort of accession now is better than later. One, the counterplan demonstrates Goldilocks. It doesn't lead to NATO enlargement towards Russia, but it's able to create commitments to Georgia. Second, this offense is non-unique. They have no evidence that says accession is inevitable. In fact, all of the cards that are been read in the 2 and C on say no demonstrate this the case. 2AC6, they say no impact to Russia or democracy. We agree. We didn't read an impact about it. 2AC, Group 2AC 7 through 9. Two important framing issues. The first is that they have no defense to the Russian preemptive strike scenario. The impact defense of the Middle East instability stuff is isolated from that. Second, they have no defense of the Georgia moral hazard argument, which turns all their sort of Black Sea scenarios. And the Middle East war is likely now. COVID set the stage in the next Arab Spring. Russia will destabilize. Yeah.
Yeah, you read that in the 1 and C.
Oh, is that the 1 and C?
Yeah.
Okay. And Russia will use A2AD to accomplish objectives in the Middle East, causes conflict and escalate into hot war. Everyone in 18D, Russia used A2AD to neutralize NATO's advantage. A2AD becomes a threat to limit alliances freedom within a territory. Pulling A2AD bombs created by Russia's outside the territory, such as Syria, would enable Russia to have a constant forces escalate tension and lead to hot conflict. Russia would threat of operation. The forces Russia get threatened in NATO, all of NATO bases on NATO forces deployments and plead. And that's just use of deploy nations Russia's choice and the A2AD when they will further actions to Russia achieve its NATO objectives in the near broad Middle East and whether they deem it necessary. It also draws in the entire idea of the world. Hong in 20. It's not just the United States that risk risk of war, increasing the risk given the emerging Moscow Beijing turn access states for the U.S. strike China and Russia complete and unprecedented military deals. The Middle East was already a power key with conflicts in Syria, Libya, and Yemen, and the Palestinians. Now, go back to 2AC2, the like misread history argument. Georgia is indefensible. Men in 20 Georgia and UK will be impossible to defend with the credibility errors covered by A2ADD. Disputes stake list of the Russian armies and scale resources, locations, Russian advance relancing and resupplying. The NATO faces asymmetry. Georgia and UK are the most consequential to Russia's threat in the United States. The lesson offered by Georgia war, Crimea, and suggests and Marvin, I was thinking about the status stuff. I don't think we need it, right?
No, it should be fine. Yeah.
We're good.
I think we had 806, but I don't see it in the chat. Is that accurate?
I think it was 806.
That's
yeah.
correct. 806.
806, we're starting. All right, we have 348. I'm gonna send the doc. Sent.
So good.
Like front of the stand.
Okay. Does everybody have the doc? All right. The order, if everybody's ready, is the Georgia advantage, the frozen conflicts advantage, the counterplan, the advantage counterplan, and then the expansion DA. Anybody need any part of that again?
Nope. I'm muting.
All right. Okay. Stop me if you're not ready. Let's see everyone. All right. Yes, we have a Georgia key warrant. All of those other allies are why Russia will attack in Georgia, since they know that they don't have a NATO defense guarantee. And if they don't have a NATO defense guarantee, that escalates, causes extinction, and goes nuclear because Iran, Russian, and U.S. interest in the Black Sea region, close proximity to nuclear systems, makes escalation control impossible. Pakistan being used for energy for years is also irrelevant. Georgia is key to diversify Russian control. Sidestepping Russia is key because they have ultimate control and can destabilize energy flows. Destabilize energy flows, which also is a reason why we solve some of their say no arguments. NATO, Georgia, and the U.S. all say yes to the plan. U.S. leadership pushes it through. None of their evidence assumes that. They're the largest actor in NATO and control the discussion and overcome skepticism. Holdouts are from territorial disputes. Russia has a veto because they would automatically trigger Article 5. The plan removes those from Article 5 coverage, which solves. PC also solves. The reason allies are uncertain is because of lack of U.S. leadership. Fears are melting away. Hybrid tactics have created distrust of Russian goodwill and make Georgian accession necessary. Their evidence doesn't assume political developments in opposed states. Meaningful debate also solves because it allows the idea to be fleshed out in a way that appeals to disagreeers. There are only specific evidence is about Russian opposition to accession, which is irrelevant because they'll concede territory post-plan if the rest of Georgia joins because they'll be encircled. Russia can't cut off energy because the plan reduces European reliance, and that would tank their economy when it's already in the shitter. Georgia says yes, they want good faith attempts at integration because of political demands, but we don't need to win say yes because U.S. goodwill towards membership solves U.S.-Georgia cooperation by preventing a drift towards Russia. Yes, there's a Mediterranean impact. Coordination doesn't solve energy disputes. Energy disputes escalate due to economic interests. They can't be checked. They go nuclear, causes great power war due to miscalculation and regional interests. Russian gas flaring also goes nuclear and causes extinction. It being high is uniqueness now. The AF solves that by creating competition with Russian gas companies and avoiding flaring. Otherwise, it destroys the environment through Arctic biodiversity. And diversifying it doesn't solve now because the EU is still buying from Russia. The frozen conflicts advantage. The first argument is irrelevant. Geography is key. Georgia's geography is key. We'll also read evidence on the DA that disproves this. Free riding is wrong. The plan increases NATO participation in the Black Sea, which is all we need to win. And our scenario is not hybrid war. It's about Russia occupying territories to prevent a Western moving states. The question is preceded by frozen conflicts, not hybrid conflict. They've dropped the territorial disputes impact. The plan creates a model that solves them globally. Those go nuclear due to regional interests, and because it was dropped, the plan also offsets Russian influence, which solves stability in the Middle East by allowing Turco-Armenian cooperation. That solves extinction and solves the impacts to the DA through creating an architecture of stability. Russia also escalates in Nagorno-Karabakh absent the plan through territorial disputes via the model set in Georgia, which escalates due to the alliance and high in missile postures, the advantage counterplan. Permutation do both shields the net benefit since it reorients U.S. posture that reassures any Russian encroachment. The counterplan obviously links the net benefit. It results in forced deployments and arms sales to Georgia, and they said that it successfully deters Russia in the black. It's all distinct from the neutrality position of Finland. That is the model for the counterplan. They can't spike out of it since they read Ev that describes the counterplan. Anything else means you can't vote for it because it creates a moral hazard for F elephants. It doesn't solve the Georgia advantage. One, say no. The Georgian public refuses anything less than membership. Russia uses political tactics to inject disinformation, magnifying the perception that the counterplan is a slap in the face, saying to have this Mayan alliance instead of fulfilling our decades-old obligation to let you join NATO, which continues the current trend towards the east. Recent protests and storming of the Capitol prove it's not a blip. We read 1AC and 2AC evidence about it. They can't change hybrid wars about rhetoric and politics, not Russian forces. But bonus is about existing NATO members being more efficient. Their card is about membership, not bilateral arrangement. 2AC Kutela, U.S. underwrite credible commitments to these countries, extending commitments to protect East Europe and the Baltics. This concept has been realized to countries in East Europe and the Baltics now, and it's going to security arrangements. To energy resources, it's about integration into NATO, not U.S. Georgia ties, because the premise is Russia reliance on Russian gas lines for the EU. Those ties are vital. Morningstar's money 20 points for Europe to avoid dependence to the SG and less than probability Russia could use energy for gain. It doesn't solve frozen conflicts. It's about creating a flexible MAP precedent within NATO to ensure Russia relieving of the territory and show that NATO will assist valuable assets in the region to integrate with the West. They must fully reverse the original precedent, not slap a bandage on the wound, which is what the counterplan effectively does by preventing a Western move towards NATO accession, which is a previously enshrined commitment. Going to skip those other two cards for now. The expansion DA. Top level, Russia's not preempting anybody. They have no strategic incentive. It costs too much. If they feel threatened, they won't start a war over it. No Syria impact either. Escalation was rhetorical. Russia only wants to show they mean business, not start a global nuclear war. No turns case. We solve the terminal impact of the DA through deterrence and Middle Eastern stability. They have not read uniqueness evidence for the DA. Russia's already encircled and should have lashed out, which disproves the internal link. Biden sees them as the biggest threat to national security. He's strengthening NATO, and military reinforcements with Poland and the Baltics outweigh other factors because they're in Russia's sphere of influence. Numerous post-Soviet setbacks. Slumps Dickinson 12-10 signs of the time may be turned decisive against the Kremlin interests and Soviet space experience setbacks. Moldova incumbent was defeated by pro-Western to pursue the EU. Armenia, Turkish waged victorious war against Armenia. Moscow forced to accept the rival power was a watershed moment that shattered Russia's ability to dictate outcomes in the former USSR. Belarus struck close to home, anathema to Moscow was a direct threat to the Kremlin. No doubt Moscow, Belarus definitely turned to the West if not physically prevented. The NEC has also read lots of evidence that says Russia dislikes expansion, but none says they'll use a nuke because of it. Threshold for the impact is unimaginably high given no uniqueness evidence and general unwillingness to use a nuke when it's not required. Russia knows Georgia doesn't matter to them. Failure in Syria and Libya dampen their willingness to intervene. They're bogged down in Ukraine because of the Donbass. They have to deal with COVID, which all means they can't afford to make a big deal about Georgian accession and have no incentive to. Prefer our evidence. Russia was the aggressor in Georgia because they fucking invaded it. Russian policymakers are only aggressive when they have an opportunity to, which means it isn't encirclement to say that they shouldn't invade countries. That's the Schultz evidence. Georgia's not key. Broader NATO expansion is the issue, which is not unique. German 17 decision not to grant Georgian MAP encourage Moscow continue coercion decision, not let it improve in relations. NATO augment its posture, establish an EFP, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland underlies failure to grasp the depth of Russian coercion. Russia holds a de facto veto for Georgia. Deterrence failure is more likely to cause war than provoking Russia, which means the advantage outweighs Kutela. 70 best way to deter, helping me to demonstrate results decision not to offer an MAP showcase like community, open the door for Russia, which yet to see a similar exercise against NATO. Failure will undermine credibility. The individual indefensibility of Georgia is irrelevant. Hamilton 16. No NATO. It's defensible individually applies Baltics and Norway. Now the entire idea behind collective defense of states not able to individually can do so collectively to deter NATO doesn't have to make Georgia prevail. It doesn't have to make NATO able. Assurance attack would provoke not only from Germany but also US, France, and the UK deter aggression. NATO can defend Georgia. Kyle 19. If Georgia becomes a member, check the NATO would be an effective deterrent to Russian aggression. NATO maintains effective deterrence options that display force because neither econ or forces are strong enough to fight a protracted war. That card is marked at to fight a protracted war.
Was it 750?
750. Yeah, 750.
Okay.
Correct.
Starting that now. Okay. The order is the counterplan, the disadd, advantage 1, advantage 2. Are we all good?
Oh, let me mute.
Yeah. Cool. Making Georgia a bilateral ally is sufficient to solve. They have no NATO membership key one, and much less an impact to integrating Georgia as a bilateral ally instead of integrating into NATO. The threshold for them winning a solvency is that membership is absolutely necessary to resolve the interlink, not that it's just a potential method. 2AC1 or 1AR1 was permutation do both. It links to the net benefit. This reassurance argument makes no sense because Article 5 guarantees encourage a Georgian moral hazard as well. Encourage a Georgian moral hazard as well as uniquely poke the bear. We have evidence explicitly differentiating the two. The reassurance argument thing is also not explained. The difference is very clear between membership and a bilateral alliance. 2AC2 is that it links to that benefit because we give like things like troops and arms sales. One, they would be similar to something like Taiwan, which proves solvency because we give them arms sales and have a military ties with them, but it does not provoke China. The counterpoint would be a similar sort of setup where it would be sufficient enough to deter any sort of attacks, but not poke the bear because membership is the key internal link. We have, of course, explicitly differentiating the two. Abkhazia Evans explicitly says designating Georgia bilaterally incentivizes their dependability on the U.S., thereby enabling pursuit of interest in the Black Sea, Caucasus, and Central Asia. Arduge evidence is excellent. Directly compares the counterpoint to the planet. It says the bilateral relationship can promote democracy, deter terrorists, help with energy transit, and serve as a forward ally. But the counterpoint is the right equilibrium because it provides the necessary integration without provoking Russia. Or Abraham evidence goes further and says that the bilateral status quells Russian encroachment and stabilizes the region, but doesn't go as far as NATO membership would undermine security. Bilat is the key sort of power balance. 2AC3 is that they would say no to membership. One, you do not have a say no card. They just have one card that says that Georgia has a document saying they want to get membership. This is not a say no argument or a reason they would not want bilateral membership. All our evidence demonstrates that Georgia does want to integrate, but it does not have to be membership as the avenue for integration. Providing them a bilateral designation is sufficient to be able to solve. And if they are right that it's just a signal of adding Georgia, then obviously the signal of a bilateral status is also sufficient to solve. 2AC4 is this hybrid war argument. One, they do not have a membership key warrant to deter Russian hybrid war. The counterpoint does stop hybrid war because it enables defense of Georgia when necessary by expanding ties and providing arms sales, etc. All things which are sufficient to solve. They don't have a card differentiating that sort of relationship between having an Article 5 guarantee, which is not sufficient. Regardless, there's no impact to hybrid war, which I will do more. But below, the next argument is about other members. This really wasn't warranted out or make any sense. If there needs to be integration between Georgia and other members of NATO, the U.S. can serve as the sort of hub and spoke, which is the sort of argument that our Babone evidence is making. The United States can provide integration that's necessary. Regardless, that is not necessary for Black Sea deterrence, and regardless, other members of NATO, if they are that necessary, would just deter it by themselves. The rereading of our card does not say membership. I don't know what they think they got out of this. Next argument about Russian gas. One, their evidence just does not say it is necessary, just says it is sufficient. The plan can obviously provide the sort of southern gas corridor that is necessary by designating Georgia as a bilateral ally, thereby enabling a sort of thing. They don't have a reason that it's sort of key or cocoon evidence says the bilateral commitments can create the strategic alliance to demonstrate sufficient resolve to Russia without provoking them. The final argument about territory. One, their evidence does not say that membership is necessary to provide the sort of territory signaling argument. It just says that Georgian integration, which the counterpoint provides, they have no NATO key warrant. Now, the disadvantage. Now, at the top, very easy way to vote negative. The words moral hazard do not come out of the 1AR's mouth. The 1AR clearly flagged it as an independent link and impact scenario and read more evidence on it. No new answer. They have dropped that giving Georgia NATO Article 5 status invokes a moral hazard. The ironclad commitment of NATO causes Georgian reckless driving in the Black Sea. Georgia would have greater incentive to head against Russia with a perceived insurance of Article 5, proven by their aggression in 2008, falling into improving ties with the West as Ruger and Maine. Evidence the impact alone outweighs the case. 8 guarantees war with Russia. A reckless Georgia with NATO Article 5 commitments can now force the U.S. to go to war with Russia by poking the bear, forcing escalation. U.S. nuclear war, Russian nuclear war causes extinction. Even a limited nuclear strike or nuclear accident wipes out the globe. B, this moral hazard argument alone makes it impossible for them to solve any part of the case. It causes conflict in the Black Sea, which means they cannot solve conflict in Iran and destroy energy security or serve. It also turns their territorial disputes impact by causing war in Eastern Europe. Finally, before I get into the line by line, they have conceded from the 1R that this is an independent impact that the counterplan avoids. The counterplan does not provide Article 5 status guarantee. The U.S. will fight a war for Georgia, which eliminates the moral hazard, means they just try or die for the counterplan. Now, the line by line proper 2AC one about the preemptive strike. They did not make defensive preemptive strike strategies only pro Russia would preempt. Our evidence is a historical analysis and says it's likely. They said there would be no escalation in the Middle East. We're largely not going for this impact, but there would be escalation proven by TNWs. That Middle East war turns the case and
and means and counterbalancing makes it more likely because Russia responds to sort of provocations that think about them solving the terminal impact. No, you do not. Do not serve the terminal impact because it's interlinked about counterbalancing. The next argument is there's no uniqueness for the DA and dividing and strengthening commitments. It's about poking the bear in Georgia. There's obviously uniqueness for the DA because obviously Georgia is not a NATO member now, nor are they moving towards ascension. If they are, then absolutely neg on presumption because Georgia is joining NATO. But obviously, if they have not joined NATO yet, that is sufficient uniqueness for us. All the other thumpers are not about our specific scenario, which is counterbalancing via Georgia. The next argument about again, they just said no uniqueness evidence again. Their scenarios are uniqueness argument. They see Georgia does not matter. Georgia does matter. Invites aggression. That was all the moral hazard argument. Deterrence does not work because Russia is not because Russia is not easily deterred. That was our GOAT's evidence on the case. They say broader on NATO expansion. These next three cards are largely irrelevant to the moral hazard stuff. All these arguments about needing being able to defend Georgia. Georgia is a small country. The geography is far more difficult, meaning we cannot reinforce them. All their cards just say the alliance could. They are overly optimistic, sort of deep engagement people that do not assume the unique nature of Georgia. Now, the first advantage, Russia, the advantage is illogical. There's not a Georgia key warrant. Black Sea can be deterred via Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey. The threshold for them winning an internal link to this is that it is impossible to turn the Black Sea without having Georgia. Our prior evidence is that Turkey has the second largest military, airports, etc., which means it is more than sufficient to solve 20 years in Afghanistan to disprove any internal link to that sort of impact. Now, they've dropped our Kakachia evidence, which says that territorial integrity is not the only issue, which proves our sort of pokes the bear argument. It's directly responsive to their coffee evidence says that Russia would still feel aggression and cause hybrid war, no Mediterranean conflict. Our evidence says that all sides, it's stable now, and that all sides don't want to escalate. No Russian flares. Impact is empirically denied by coronavirus. The frozen conflict is managed. NATO Georgia deterrence is not solved, and no Russian hybrid war failed in Georgia, which is our sorry evidence, which means that Russia cannot serve as an effective model that causes more preventive conflicts.
339.
Yeah, 339. I'm just gonna get set up and then I'll be good. I'll meet it. Yeah. The order. Let me make sure everyone is. Yep. Okay. The order will be the Georgia advantage, the frozen conflict advantage, the advantage counterplan, the DA. Just everybody good? Okay. Cool. There are way too many conceded impacts at the end of the debate that all cause extinction and nuclear conflict that ensures the eradication of humanity in favor of a disadvantage where there's severely lacking evidence or any explanation of those impacts means that any single solvency deficit to the counterplan means sufficient for an AF ballot. One is Black Sea conflict. It goes nuclear now. Intermingling of forces and new technology developments within the region ensure that any conflict between the U.S. and Russia and NATO member states and goes at nuclear quick due to misperceptions and miscalculated accidents. It will happen likely now. Russia will encroach because of weak deterrence in the region. Also Syria, Romanian resource grabs and also separatism within Odessa itself all ensure conflict in the region. Those are all independent and external of just deterring of Russia, but necessary to ensure Georgian maintenance within the region. Though that is necessary because even if other states exist within the region, we need to create a full spectrum that creates it holds itself at critical seaports, which are necessary for access of the region at a key location. One would not say that certain parts of the United States are not valuable just because they exist, just because we have bases in other parts. There are strategic endpoints in Georgia that provide vital access routes to the entirety of the Black Sea, means that those other states by themselves cannot solve other issues before integration. NATO will say yes, all those other issues are overcome by the fact that the U.S. takes a strong lead against them. They are the dominant power, caused everyone to follow along at 9/11, and literally every single other issues dictates all of NATO alliance policy, causes Germany and France to come on board. Even if they aren't on board initially, it causes them to come on. The only warrant that the 2NR brought up was other issues. This is their 2NC card, which is not about other issues. It's only indicative of how Russia would not like the plan. Yes, thank God. Russia would not like the plan because it results in effective deterrence against them. It fully reverses the precedent, fully reverses a terrible precedent NATO that they set against it. Next is the gas firing impact and zero defense, just said Rowan Thompson. That's irrelevant. It's a question of whether or not Europe is dependent on Russian natural gas resources, which can only be solved by including Georgia into NATO in order to provide them the resources. There's a strategic pipeline that connects oil in the Mediterranean that can then go to Georgia. Obviously, can't be solved by just a counterplan, but I'll do that later. Gas flaring causes extinction because it causes a massive amount of particulates in the air. In terms of environmental destruction, can't negotiate. That means you must outweigh on scope because it's the one thing that you can be certain that causes the eradication of all humanity via environmental degradation. Frozen conflict advantage. I'm just gonna be really quick here. Deterrence of Georgia doesn't matter. It's a question about the precedent Senate reversing the signal of an inflexible MAP in order to ensure that countries can join NATO. Only gonna go for the territorial conflicts. Impact causes nuclear war globally because of hotspots that are likely to escalate. They conceded it had no defense. Deterrence is irrelevant. The plan reverses the signal. Counterplan. At the top, the counterplan by definition links in a benefit. Their explanation of this is totally incoherent. The counterplan has to extend arms sales to Georgia, has to extend troops to Georgia, at least in some capacity, has to result in a bunch of changes to the posture of Georgia that are able to deny a Russian presence within the Black Sea. They themselves have said that the counterplan results in full spectrum deterrence. Their cards will be rhetorically powerful and might try to establish a distinction, but the counterplan is none of the things that their evidence parses through. This is sort of the thing that flattered the 1AR at the bottom of links in a benefit, which is that you should just err massively on all these questions because the counterplan's explanation is incoherent. What does it do? You might say, yes, it does a bilateral partnership, but what constitutes that? Obviously, the AF results in Georgia joining NATO. There are certain speculations what that treaty is, but when you read all the evidence and try to piece all the steps together, what they've said first, they said that the counterplan results in MNNA. They read a card and said that that's beneficial. That might be a good idea, but that's entirely different from the Finland precedent, which they then read links in a benefits card saying that that's what the counterplan could also be. Then they read Taiwan, which is also factually distinct from Finland because there's other necessary contours of that agreement. And then they said a hub and spokes agreement, which said that they use as their answer to solvency deficits, which results in the deployment of troops to the front lines of Georgia. What does the counterplan do? If you have zero clue. You cannot possibly vote on this. There's a moral hazard. We cannot generate any AF options or explain to you any coherent solvency deficits. At best, this is a reason to error AF. Next, not going to do the say no stuff, but the comment by definition cannot solve a US-EU integration. They just said that the US can draw NATO and Georgia together. First, that's not a piece of carded evidence. That's a new to in our argument that dropped the explicit 2AC warning about energy integration and NATO being necessary, but also that makes absolutely zero sense. Georgia does not trust Europe now because they are not in NATO. The only integration between the two can ensure the access to the pipeline. It is completely incoherent and factually impossible for the countermeasure to possibly resolve that. How does oil go to a non-partner now if the thing that Georgia wants is that partnership, and it is that partnership via NATO that would facilitate access to the pipeline? They do not touch any of that, which means the gas flaring impact is massive. Next is the frozen conflict advantage. They can't solve it, must fully reverse the precedent. Yes, the countermeasure might result in a hub and spokes model, but does not result in the return of South Ossetia into a Caucasia, and does not reverse the precedent that Russia can just willy-nilly invade certain sovereign states in order to encroach upon them, prevent him integrating into other states. Remember, the precedent that you are reversing here is not have a partnership with the United States. Rather, the precedent of the denied 2008 Bucharest Amendment was something which should have resulted in Georgia fully joining NATO. Now the dissent at the top, the moral hazard thing that they've essentially couched the entirety of the ban on is absolutely bullshit. You'll parse through the entirety of the 1 and R. The reason why we supposedly dropped this is because it's literally 6 words in one card in the 1 and R, and they functionally stake the entirety of the dissent on it. It just says that Georgia will engage in reckless driving. What does that mean? The 2 and R kind of just said the words that they'll do it in the Black Sea, but that's irrelevant. Even if Georgia gets a little bit more aggressive in the Black Sea, remember that is not an external impact. That is the exact same impact as the one I see in our argument is that Black Sea conflict is inevitable for a variety of other factors, which means at best it's try or die AF on that impact. Now, you cannot possibly fathom voting on this. You cannot turn any of the rest of the case because the AF is sufficiently able to reserve violent precedent on the frozen conflicts thing. Next, the entire rest of the dissent about Russian expansion proper and denying Russia's status, it might seem like they have a lot of evidence that is specific and contextual to the act, but none of that is true. Russia is facing a bunch of different conflicts in the status quo that are all denying them the exact same thing. The very premise is that they've had their status denied, their territorial conflicts near them. The West is encroaching upon them. Russia has suffered severe losses that are causing all states that are near them now to tilt towards the West, which ensures it triggers this impact. Our Schultz evidence indicates that they're suffering losses in Libya, Syria, Belarus, and the Donbass, all of which are historical deep-seated conflicts for Russia, where they're feeling a massive losses because they're having to invest resources they're getting straight up denied. Also, we've also read a piece of evidence, the German evidence says that Biden independently will encroach upon them by deploying forces to the front lines and will strengthen the alliance. We've even read a comparative piece of evidence which says that outweighs expansion proper because Putin sees the most troubling thing as troop deployments to the Baltics and Poland, not a rhetorical increase of commitment to Georgia. Think about it. The U.S. is putting troops on the border. We are denying them status in literally every other place. There's no reason why there's no coherent reason as to why Georgia is the linchpin of all those things. Extend the Dickinson card here as well. It says that literally every single post-Soviet space country, which Georgia is, aside from Georgia, is already going to the West. It thumps this. Good debate, Dartmouth.
Good debate.
That's Dallas.
Yeah. Dallas, would you like a card doc as a PDF? You're muted, Dallas.
Yes, that would be fabulous, especially if it shows in some comprehensive way what was read.
Yep.
But only on the case, the dissent, and the counterplan, right?
Yep.
Good, thanks.
I just sent the doc. Dallas, I'm about to convert it into a PDF for you.
Thanks.
The AF card doc is sent. Dallas, the PDF is also sent.
Thanks. No punt.
This is an 8-minute warning for decision time.
So what?
Yeah, so
Adam, how are you?
good.
Doing okay?
Yeah, how about you, Bill?
I'm alive and well. 14 days past my second Moderna shot, so I'm doing good.
Excellent. All right, 7 more minutes.
We have a decision. Everybody here. Really, really good debate. This is, in my opinion, what the NDT is all about. Super preparation, great execution on all sides. And unsurprisingly, I think it's a split decision, 2-1 for the affirmative from the University of Kentucky. I'm the one, so I'll talk first. Excruciatingly close. I'm pretty convinced that the negative does a good job of fighting the war scenarios on the case down fairly successfully, but it's undeniable, in my opinion, that the affirmative wins a huge impact to this environmental effect of flaring. It does seem like opening up these markets could stop it, and the negatives card that says, oh, there's a bunch of things that causes this, don't really deny that introducing some market scarcity could stop it, and new access could do that. I felt like the impacts were, probably a little overstated, but they were undenied. It seems like it's practically the end of the world. There is a little question of how quickly they can fix it, but overall, I think the affirmative definitely wins this, no matter what else happens on the case. I think, in my opinion, the evidence that says that the Mediterranean is fairly stable today, and stuff is pretty strong, and that the other countries surrounding the Black Sea can do a much better job, and as good a job without Georgia. I took the liberty of consulting a map, and Georgia's this tiny, tiny, tiny little part of the Black Seashore. I admit, I looked for a warrant in the cards about how there were particular places, and that really seemed to kind of escape me. So I don't really think the affirmative wins a short-term war scenario, but I do think they win the big gas flaring impact. Counterplan, fairly successful at, again, stopping a lot of the bad war scenarios, but I don't think it gets at the energy thing. You explicitly kick all the energy parts of the counterplan and just rely on bilateral integration to work. And I don't really, I don't know, but I don't think it gets it. The affirmative card says that exclusion of Georgia from the North Atlantic Security Club, that sounds like NATO to me, not just a bilateral relationship with the United States a long way away, who doesn't have much stake in the local energy market. So I felt like that one part of the affirmative advantage, the counterplan probably fails to get. And that's the one I think they win the biggest, and it's a huge impact, and it's not a war. I'm thinking F at that point. But I think that the neg wins enough of the expansion disad to outweigh. And I will briefly talk a little bit about the technicalities here. I don't think moral hazards at all new in the one in R, and that it was too short there to get blown up. It's in fact in the original shell, I think, and it's not answered in the 2AC, and it's not very well answered in the 1AR. And while the Mediterranean is stable today, that's based on 70 years of people living with a situation where they have to be nice to the mayor, and reckless driving by Georgia in the Black Sea, I think, could upset things and start a war. And the affirmative read the evidence that said the Middle Eastern war goes nuclear, and the negative keeps hammering at that this is an uncontestable impact. And I generally like to vote for environmental impacts as trumped up war impacts. But in this case, I felt like the contrast between the status quo and a newly reckless Georgia couldn't be more clear, and that the short-term risk that this could upset things and start a big nuclear war is a bigger, more immediate risk of a bigger impact than is gas flaring. A little subjective. Frankly, I didn't think either team did enough work trying to, isolate what they were going to win and balance. The neg never says this is bigger than gas flaring. In fact, the neg doesn't really have anything to say about gas flaring. The affirmative, I think, can do a little bit better job of saying, look, this outweighs their war on moral hazard, and make some arguments there. I do think that the 2AR doesn't get to the expansion disad with enough time. You make this big uniqueness play about how the Russians are losing their ass everywhere around the world now. Okay, but this is a new step to right on their doorstep, and with a big, huge multilateral alliance. And I agree that I think troops and stuff in the counterplan is probably just as bad. But if that's true, I don't even know why you need to be answering any part of the disad except moral hazard. I don't think the counterplan is a good strategy with expansion in general, because I think it too obviously triggers the link. In particular, troops on Russia's doorstep is the described nightmare that Russia is afraid of on NATO. The card says exactly that. And here you are saying, oh, yeah, we can do that. I don't think there's any chance we would ever do that with Taiwan. Certainly not Finland. This is a self-inflicted wound in this debate. But once you say that, I don't really think the counterplan can come away with any compelling net benefit on the war scenario. I think I've talked long enough. I'll shut up.
Okay, I can start unless you wanted to, Bill. I think that the counterplan links to the DA argument was fairly significant for me, in that I just wasn't really sure which of the strategies the counterplan was trying to employ based off of your explanation in the speeches, based off of the several different things proposed in the cards you've read. And so I was willing to defer a little bit to the app saying, like, this is probably the most expansive version of what the counterplan is, when they said this is like forward deploy a bunch of troops, give them a whole bunch of weapons. And so it's just hard for me to differentiate what it is that the plan instigates versus the counterplan, and what the real logic behind a link differential actually is. I know that your EV for the moral hazard thing for some of your links literally says that Article 5 is the thing that's driving this process, but the logic of it is just that they get so much assurance from a security relationship that they engage in reckless driving. So I think that they have a pretty strong argument that the counterplan would link to the DA, and they do have solvency deficit arguments, and the combination of those two things, of the risk of the link to the DA and the solvency deficits, are enough to reduce the comparative risk of the DA. And if I'm comparing status quo versus AF, there are some impacts that just aren't challenged. So try or die comes into play. So when I decide that counterplan links to the disad gets past a certain threshold, then I end up kicking the counterplan more often than not. I do think that both sides could make small adjustments to their debating of that issue to make it a lot more clear. I think the negative could have had a links less frame that you put into the 2NR to say yes, maybe the counterplan is kind of threatening, but there was no affirmative argument clearly tying it to the moral hazard argument. And threatening Russia less means there's less risk of war. I think that all of that framing could have tipped my ballot in making this argument less relevant. And for the AF, I think that if you just clearly connect the concept you're going for to the moral hazard link, then this becomes a lot more clear why it matters.
I thought, like Dallas, that this was a very good and close debate. I'm drawn a straight line from flaring to NATO to solvency, and no counterplan solves for flaring. And nothing in the counterplan is even attempting to solve for that advantage. And you have no impact defense from the negative side. So what I am looking at in the debate is, here's this massive environmental advantage that's an extinction scenario that's never denied, that the counterplan can't solve. And then the question becomes, what is the net benefit that the counterplan provides above and beyond the plan? Well, if it doesn't solve for the flaring advantage, which it doesn't, does it solve for expansion? And the answer is probably not. I think Tom's got my side of that equation locked in. I think that the counterplan, at a logical standpoint, links even worse, probably, although that's not the argument that's made, links even worse to the expansion DA than does the plan. I also think that I thought the AF has the better of the argument and the better the evidence on NATO warrant and NATO key. I think their evidence is a lot better in terms of the membership issues that even Dallas talked about in his RFD, that the AF evidence is speaking to membership. And when they recut your, Kiblicki card, which talks about membership as well, you're kind of indicating that perhaps the solvency of the counterplan isn't linked necessarily to this bilateral relationship, but instead is more linked to a multilateral kind of relationship that the counterplan would engender at some point. So I vote AF on flaring, undenied, totally impacted, extended in every speech. Counterplan can't solve it. Counterplan, in all likelihood, links to the DA. And I think Dallas is also right that both teams in the 2AR and 2NR could have done a better job of explaining which comes first, the chicken of war or the egg of environmental devastation. But in the end, I think that the undenied environmental impact that can't be solved by the counterplan, but is solved by the AF, wins the day. So I vote AF on the flaring advantage that's just dropped.
That all makes a lot of sense. We just have one question. I guess mostly for Glenecki, that I guess Smelko, if you also thought about the links to the net benefit argument as well. I guess for us, the moral hazard argument, we thought that was pretty intuitive / clear in terms of distinguishing the counterplan from the plan in terms of the basic guarantee that NATO gives to Georgia to support them. And I thought the card on that was relatively decent. What is it is there more explanation we need to do? Is this you don't find this argument is as intuitive as we maybe think it is? How can we, because I definitely agree with both of you that the troop stuff certainly links to it, but I don't, when the 2NR is going mostly for the moral hazard stuff, how can we distinguish the counterplan a little bit more, or is that sort of an uphill battle?
I mean, it starts in cross X when you do correctly answer the question, does the counterplan have any sort of Article 5-like commitment to mutual defense by the United States of Georgia? And you emphatically say no. That's got to be the first reference point. Yes, we did say we might put troops there, but we emphatically said that we don't have to, and we're not obligated to defend these guys if they're invaded. If they started a war by some crazy naval exercise in the Mediterranean that provoked Russia, that's not the game we're in. That's not what we guaranteed Taiwan, and we're not giving it to them. And if you can say that very clearly, I think you can keep the Article 5 link primary in the judge's mind. But the first step is to get right what the counterplan is in cross X. I agree, though. I think it's not fatal that you didn't. I mean, everybody else did, so you lost. But I think you can talk your way out of that. But it does require very clearly focusing on Article 5. And it's frankly better in the 1NR than it is in the 2NR. And that needs to change a little.
Yeah, I agree with Dallas completely on that. If you're very clear about the particular strategy that the counterplan uses in order to articulate what the relationship is between the US and Georgia, then this can make a lot more sense. If you say that the commitment is deliberately ambiguous, such that Georgia can't count on it, but Russia still thinks there's a chance, so it's kind of a dual deterrence strategy where you're stopping both of them from knowing exactly what's going to happen in a conflict situation, then I think it's way more clear why there's a difference. But just as it was, it seemed a little bit like you were just kind of counting on our card says Article 5 is the driver and didn't really get into the logic that differentiates the counterplan strategy from the plans. So I think the AF is missing the line connecting their links to the net benefit argument to each different link argument you made. And that is something I struggled a little bit with in my RFD. But I do think that the explanatory burden is on you when they're making these links to the net benefit arguments to clearly explain, like, the counterplan does not link to this one in particular. Here's the logic, and then that logic has to make sense to me.
Yeah, I will say, I still think it's a tough slog. One man's deterrence is another man's encirclement, right? Like when you say the counterplan is good enough to make sure that the Russians won't invade Georgia anymore, that's what the Russians mean when they say encirclement, is that they can't intimidate their neighbors into being nice to them anymore, which they've been able to do for roughly 1,000 years. And they're not going to give up on that willingly. And so I think it's conceptually difficult to say the counterplan deters the Russians but doesn't encircle them. That's going to be very problematic. I think, for the negative to maintain that fine line. And the affirmative needs to sort of exploit that a little more clearly, I think.
And for me, it's just a situation where I think you needed to articulate both in the 1NR and the 2NR a lot better why there is this unique link to Article 5 and the security guarantee, to where if it's just a bilateral relationship, we can back out and say, we're not defending you because you've been in a car wreck out there killing Russians. Whereas in Article 5, we have to defend you when even you start a war. And that explanation is never really made clear, either in the 1NR or the 2NR. But I think Dallas is right that, just from a logical perspective, sticking U.S. troops in there in a hi, we've got a treaty now with Georgia, and we're going to put our frontline troops out there. Kind of, one person's encirclement is another person's defensive argument. But I just think you needed better explanation of it, and I think you needed to place some impact defense to the environmental scenario. When there's an entire extinction scenario that's running through every speech, and you're leaving it up to the judge to decide what's going to happen first, I think that's not on any of the judges. That's on you needing to make that determination in the 2NR as to not just what is happening, but why what is happening from your perspective is more important than what is happening from the AF's perspective on issues that are flowing through the debate.
That makes sense. Thank you all. Good debate.
Good luck. Great debate. Good luck.
Good luck to both teams. Dallas, we'll see you tomorrow night.